Hey everyone, a quick heads up. Most people who enjoy these stories haven't subscribed yet. If you're liking the content, consider subscribing and dropping a like. It truly supports the channel. And I'm glad you're here. Also, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from, so share your location in the comments. I've been running freight long enough to know when a road wants to kill you. Name's Mark. 20 years behind the wheel, mostly running refrigerated loads through the Mountain West. Cows produce whatever fits in a 53-foot box. I've seen every kind of weather you can imagine out on those stretches, but that night in northern Wyoming, that one still sits in my bones. It was January, about 2 in the morning. I was southbound, somewhere between Sheridan and Casper, that empty section where the highway turns into a tunnel of wind and snow and not much else. I was hauling a light load, frozen bread, which is just about the worst thing you can pull on black ice. Not enough weight to really push you into the pavement. Just enough to shove you sideways when the traction goes. Outside, the world was just white. Headlights pushed out maybe 30, 40 feet before the snow swallowed everything. High beams were useless. They just lit up the storm, like I was driving inside a snow globe someone wouldn't stop shaking. I had the lows on, fogs, and my dash dimmed all the way down so my eyes could adjust. You can feel black ice before you see it. It's in the way the wheel turns, too easy, too smooth. In the way the trailer takes half a second longer to answer when you correct. That night, the steering felt like I was floating the whole rig over glass. Every tiny input came back delayed, like the road was thinking about it before answering. The CB was dead, just static and the occasional faint pop. No late-night chatter, no scale talk, nothing. It was like I was the only thing moving in the entire state. The heater hummed low. Wipers squeaked over the glass. The clock on the dash clicked over to 2:07 a.m. I remember glancing at the outside temp, minus 11 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind pushing 20, maybe 30. Wind chill that could skin your face if you stood in it long enough. I eased off the throttle, dropped from 65 to around 45. Hazard lights on. I was in that mode where every muscle's tight but your brain's dead calm. Just scanning mirrors, watching the lines when I could see them, reading the feel of the tires through the seat. About 10 miles before the next rest area, the storm thickened. The world ahead of me narrowed down to this little cone of dirty yellow light and swirling flakes. I was locked into it, tunnel vision, just following that ghost of a right edge whenever it appeared. That's when I saw her. At first, it was just a darker shape in the snow. You know how sometimes you get drifts that pile up and make weird shadows? I thought it was that. A sign, maybe. A deer off to the side. Then the shape moved into the center of the lane. My brain didn't want to accept it at first. It was too wrong for what my eyes were saying. The figure sharpened as I closed the distance. 10 seconds, maybe less, but it stretched. It was a woman, dead center in the highway, facing me. No coat, no hat. Just a thin, light-colored dress whipping in the wind like it was trying to tear itself off her body. Bare legs, bare feet on the ice. Long hair blown straight back. Arms at her sides. She didn't wave. She didn't move at all. I felt that animal jolt in my chest. That punch of adrenaline you don't forget. My foot hit the brake before I could think. Then instinct took over. I came off it quick, feathered instead. Tapped the engine brake off so I wouldn't lock up the drives. Hands light on the wheel, eyes darting from her to the mirrors. The trailer started to walk. Not much, just a little fishtail. A lazy slide like it hadn't decided yet whether it wanted to kill me. The tires were kissing pure ice under that packed powder. ABS started chattering through the pedal. I could hear the change in pitch from the trailer tires as they lost their bite. I laid on the air horn, long, loud, the kind that rattles your ribs inside the cab. She didn't flinch, didn't turn her head, didn't raise a hand, didn't even blink, best I could tell. She was just there, in the middle of that frozen interstate, in a dress that looked like it belonged at a summer barbecue, staring straight through my windshield. Every calculation I'd ever made in a skid came roaring back. I started to angle just a hair left, trying to give myself any chance to miss her without jackknifing. The wheel felt disconnected from reality, the truck responding half a beat too slow. The attach needle dipped as I came down through gears. Air brakes hissed, the trailer's silhouette twitching in the mirrors. I remember thinking, I'm going to hit her. I'm going to watch this happen. Snow flared around her legs like smoke in my headlights. The world compressed to the distance between my bumper and her bare feet. I felt the rig finally bite, the slide catching, the whole truck shuddering as the tires found just enough roughness under the ice. We came to a stop with this long, groaning complaint of metal and rubber and wind. I was shaking, but only on the inside. On the surface, I was pure habit, eyes scanning gauges, checking my lane position, making sure nobody was behind me. Then I looked up. The highway in front of me was empty. No woman, no shape, just that beam of light carving through white noise, flakes rushing at the glass. I sat there listening. Engine idled low. Fan kicked on and off. Wind pushed against the cab. No impact alarm, no collision warning, nothing. My first thought was that I'd hit her and just not felt it. That's the kind of thing that will make your blood go cold faster than the air outside. I flipped on all my work lights, set the parking brake, and grabbed my jacket. The moment I cracked the door, the cold punched into the cab. The wind carried that dry, bitter smell of hard winter, metal, diesel, snow. Stepping down onto the asphalt, I almost slipped. The pavement didn't crunch. It didn't feel like pavement at all. It was just slick. Absolute glass with a dusting of powder on top. I walked around the front of the truck, one hand on the grill for balance. Headlights threw light across the empty road, catching nothing but swirling snow and the ghost of lanes buried under it. No dents, no blood, no torn fabric caught on the bumper. I looked down. No footprints. If she'd been standing there, there should have been something. Melted patches. Prints filled in with fresh snow. Tracks going on or off the shoulder. There was nothing but wind patterns and tire marks. The only marks on that ice were mine. For a second, the wind shifted, and I thought I heard something under the howl. A kind of distant, thin sound, like someone screaming from far away. It might have been a truck miles off or just the air cutting over the guardrail, but it crawled up my spine just the same. I finished the circle, checking the trailer, the undercarriage, even crouched to look at the gap between the bumper and the road. Nothing. Clean. I climbed back into the cab, slammed the door, and sat there with my hands on the wheel, breathing through my nose. The heater felt too hot all of a sudden. I killed the radio without realizing I'd even turned it on. It took me a full minute before I released the brake and eased back onto the throttle. The rest area came up slower than it should have. I pulled in, slid the rig into a slot near the edge, and set everything down. The lot was almost empty. Just one other truck towards the far entrance. Engine idling, curtains drawn tight. Sodium lights bathed the snow in this sick yellow glow. Inside the cab, it was just me, the tick of cooling metal, and the soft whir of the dash cam still recording. That's when I remembered it, the camera. I'd mounted it a month earlier after a near miss with a drunk in Idaho. Front-facing, wide angle, constantly looping unless you hit the save button. My hands weren't steady, but they worked. I reached up, tapped the little button. The clip locked. I pulled the card, plugged it into my old laptop on the bunk. Snow, headlights, empty road. I scrubbed back to a few minutes before I hit the brakes, set the playback to half speed. There I was rolling through the storm, visibility going from bad to worse. It felt weirder watching it from outside myself, that beam of light tunneling through darkness. Then she appeared. On the screen, it was clearer than my memory. 1 second, the highway was empty. The next, she was there already in the lane. No walking into frame, no approach from the shoulder. Just there, like the storm had spit her out fully formed. I hit pause, leaned closer. You could see the dress, clinging to her legs. Hair plastered to the side of her face, frozen in the wind. Skin too pale even under the headlight glare. I stepped through frame by frame, watching my truck close the distance. My own headlights flickered as the ABS engaged. The rig shifted, snow blasting sideways. And then, in one frame, just one, she wasn't standing anymore. She was right up against the grill, pressed flat, arms splayed, hair blown back, her face inches from the lens. Mouth stretched wide in a silent scream, teeth bared, eyes so wide you could see the whites all the way around, like something had peeled them open. Her skin looked wrong, not just pale, cold-burned, lips cracked and dark, frost clinging to her lashes. It wasn't a blur. It wasn't compression or artifacts. It was sharp, too sharp. Every line of her features was there for that single snapshot in time. Next frame, she was gone. The truck was stopped. Empty road ahead. Snow. Headlights. I went back. Forward. Back again. Same thing every time. Standing in the road. One frame pressed to the grill, screaming into the camera. Nothing. I don't know how long I sat there, replaying that slice of video. Long enough for the heater to make the cab feel like a sauna. Long enough for my breath to stop fogging in front of my face. Eventually, I killed the laptop, pulled the curtains, and tried to sleep. Tried. It was another driver who gave it a name weeks later. I was swapping stories in a truck stop diner outside Cheyenne. Middle of the night, coffee gone lukewarm between my hands. I mentioned the stretch, the storm, the ice. The old guy across from me got real quiet. You see her on black ice? I nodded, slow. He didn't ask what she looked like. He didn't ask what she was wearing. He just stared at his mug. Happened a few winters back, he said. Family sedan hit that patch and spun out under a tanker. They say the youngest girl got out somehow. Barefoot, nightgown on. Tried to flag someone down in the middle of the storm. They didn't find her until daylight. He looked up at me then, eyes tired. Way we tell it. She's still trying. I've driven that route a dozen times since. I slow down even more now, sometimes to the point where dispatch calls to ask what's wrong with my logs. I don't tell them that every time the road goes slick and the world turns into a tunnel of snow, I'm waiting to see her again in my headlights. And sometimes, when the glass in front of me catches the light just right, for half a second I don't see my own reflection. I see skin pressed close, frost on lashes, eyes stretched wide, screaming at me from the other side. I've been running long enough to know that some stretches of highway don't belong to us. Name's Rob. I haul building supplies and machinery through the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, the up. Winter runs mostly. Chains, blizzards, black ice, the usual fun. I drive a blue Cascadia, sleeper cab, Detroit engine that hums like a refrigerator when it's happy and growls when it isn't. This was 3 winters back, late January. I was heading north on Highway 53 in Minnesota, running from Duluth up past Virginia, aiming to make it near International Falls by morning. Frozen lumber in the box, nothing fancy. Dispatch wanted the drop early, and I wanted off those roads before the real deep freeze hit. By the time I got near Elephant Lake, the storm had closed in for real. You know the kind of snow I'm talking about. Not soft flakes drifting down. This was hard, wind-driven stuff. Horizontal. The kind that sandblasts your windshield and eats your visibility down to a tunnel. My headlights were pushing out maybe 10, 15 feet before the world just turned into white static. High beams didn't help. They just lit up the storm like I'd pointed my truck into a screen of noise. I had the dash dimmed all the way down, wipers running constant. Heater on low so the glass wouldn't fog. The cab smelled like stale coffee, cold diesel off my coat, and that dry plastic smell every truck seems to have in winter. Radio off. CB on 19. Nothing but low static and a faint, faraway hiss. Outside temp read -14 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind chill had to be worse. I dropped my speed from 60 to around 35, hazards on, just crawling. The road was a suggestion more than a surface. I'd feel the tires thrum when I crossed the rumble strip, then ease it back. No other headlights in either direction. Just me and whatever idiot deer might decide to test God in the middle of the highway. I remember the sound of the tires best. That muted crunch over packed snow with an occasional slip underneath, like they were biting into something soft laid over glass. Every time the rear end twitched, my hands tightened on the wheel. My trailer was heavy enough to keep me planted, but light enough to remind me I wasn't in charge if the ice decided otherwise. Somewhere past Elephant Lake, maybe 5 or 10 miles. Distances get strange in storms. The CB hissed louder for a second. I leaned toward it, waiting for a voice. Nothing. Just a pop, then back to low static. I glanced at the clock on the dash. 1:48 a.m. That's when the light hit my mirrors. At first, I thought it was a reflection, snow catching my own beams in some weird way. But then it steadied, bright and rhythmic. Amber strobes, high up like on top of a plow. They punched through the storm behind me, glowing in the side mirrors like twin suns. Too close. I checked my speed again. 33. I eased onto the shoulder as much as I dared, wheels hugging the right side, giving whatever was back there room. The lights followed. I could hear it now under the sound of my engine, this low, grinding scrape. Metal on ice, like a constant shovel dragging along the pavement. It vibrated through the frame, up into my seat. The mirrors trembled with it. Whoever was behind me had their blade down, pushing hard. About time, I muttered, even though my mouth was dry. A plow out here was a blessing most nights. I flicked my marker lights, an old courtesy way of saying, "Go around, buddy." He didn't. The lights stayed locked to my rear doors, maybe a truck length behind, close enough that every bump lined up our movements. I could feel the presence of it. Big, heavy, crawling right in my shadow. That scraping just kept going. Steady, like someone dragging a metal bed frame across a frozen floor. I grabbed the CB mic. "Northbound 53 by Elephant. You the plow riding my ass?" My voice sounded smaller in my own ears than I wanted it to. "You want to come around? I'll give you the lane." Static. Then a faint crackle like someone might key up. But no voice. I tried again. "Plow behind the blue Freightliner. You reading me?" Nothing. I frowned, checked the RF gain squelch channel. Everything was where it should be. I could hear the white noise like normal. Just no one on the other end. The plow's lights seemed to pulse brighter in my mirrors, reflecting off the ice dust. The scraping got louder, if that was possible, rattling the glass in my side windows. It was making me nervous. Not the storm, I can handle storms. But somebody running that close behind me in this weather? That's how pileups start. If I had to brake for anything, he'd be inside my trailer doors before he knew what hit him. I made a decision. There was a turnout coming up. I remembered it from summer runs, a little gravel loop with a sign, basically just a widened patch truckers used to chain up or check straps. It'd be half buried in snow now, but still there. I spotted the dark shape of the signpost through the blizzard, just barely. I tapped my brakes, flashed my right turn signal. The plow's lights did not move, still centered, still way too close. "Come on, man," I said to nobody, jaw tight. I eased off the throttle, letting my speed bleed down to 25, then 20. The scraping stayed right behind me, matching. The pitch never changed. It was like that blade was welded to my bumper. The turnout appeared ahead, half swallowed by drifts. I turned in slow, letting the trailer swing, watching my mirrors for the angle. Tires crunched deeper through unplowed snow. A different sound, more solid. The plow followed. Those amber strobes washed over the side of my trailer as I curved. I could feel its presence hit the fresh snow behind me, but I didn't hear any change in the scraping. No heavier crunch, just that same metal on ice drag. I pulled all the way through, nose angled back toward the road, and came to a stop. Engine at idle, hazards clicking. The plow didn't stop. It rolled right past my driver's side, out of the turnout and back onto 53. I turned my head to watch it. For a second, all I saw was mass. Old orange body under a frosting of salt and grime. Big county-style plow blade up front, rust chewed into the metal. Amber strobes on the roof, flashing slow. Headlights cutting hazy cones through the storm. And the cab windows, they were dark. Not tinted, not glare, just empty. No silhouette behind the wheel. No shape in the passenger seat. The glass was rimmed with frost on the inside, like it had been sitting out in the cold for days. The engine made no sound as it passed. That scraping I'd been hearing rattling my teeth was still going, but it didn't match the movement. There was this half second where the plow was in front of me, blade cutting through snow, and the noise came from behind my truck instead. Then it was ahead of me, out on the highway, rolling straight down the center of the lane at maybe 30 miles an hour. I watched the path behind it. There were no tracks. The snow in its wake lay smooth and untouched, just as churned and windblown as the rest of the road. No clean cut where the blade had been. No dark stripes of asphalt. Just the storm erasing everything. I blinked, leaned forward, straining to see through the side window. The strobes pulsed further and further up the road, haloed by snow. For a second, the plow seemed to flicker like a bad video feed. One frame there, one frame slightly shifted, then back. Kept going. Straight ahead. Right toward a curve I knew damn well was there. A long, gentle bend to the right with a shallow ditch on the left and trees beyond. The plow didn't turn. It rolled dead straight, light steady, blade set, until the curve started to steal it from my view. Then, without brake lights, without slowing, it drifted off the road. Not like a slide. Not a loss of control. Just a straight, unwavering line off the paved shoulder and into the darkness. The strobes vanished in the whiteout. The scraping stopped. Silence flooded in. No engine. No grind. Just the hum of my own truck and the wind clawing at the cab. I sat there in that turnout, hands locked on the wheel, staring at where it had gone off. The hair on my arms was standing despite the heater. After a minute that felt longer than it was, I put the truck back in gear, eased out, and crept forward to the spot where it had left the road. My headlights washed over the shoulder, the ditch, the scrub brush. Nothing. No plow. No glare of hazard lights half buried in a drift. No outline of a vehicle at all. Just wind-sculpted snow, some frozen grass tips poking through, and black trees beyond. I rolled past slow, scanning both sides. There was nowhere for something that big to just disappear. But it had. I grabbed the CB again, throat dry. Any units in the area northbound 53 by Elephant Lake? My voice had a crack in it. Got a possible vehicle off the road. Snowplow. Not sure what I'm seeing here. This time, someone answered. Copy, northbound 53. This is State Patrol. You got a mile marker. We went back and forth, me giving them the closest marker I'd seen, describing what I thought I'd watched. I edited the part about no driver. Left it as couldn't see inside. Troopers said they'd send a car to check the ditch. 45 minutes later, in a gas station lot further up, my phone rang. State Patrol. They wanted clarification. They'd driven that whole stretch. No plow. No fresh tracks where one could have gone off. Snow was smooth, untouched. The trooper on the line was quiet for a second. Then he asked, in this careful voice, "What did it look like?" "The plow." I told him, "Old county-style rig, orange, rust on the blade, amber bar up top." I mentioned the faint black number stenciled on the side panel I'd glimpsed, 17. He let out a breath I could hear through the phone. "That's why the dispatcher flagged this," he said. "Plow 17 was decommissioned in '09. One of our operators died taking it off that stretch in a whiteout. Went into the ditch. They didn't find him until morning." He paused, like he was listening to something else in the room. "Every couple winters," he added, voice lower, "somebody calls in about a lone plow riding their bumper up there. Old orange. No driver. No tracks. We go look. We never find anything." I didn't say much after that. There wasn't anything to say. I still run 53. Storms don't care what you've seen. Freight still has to move. But whenever the snow gets thick and my visibility shrinks to that narrow tunnel, I check my mirrors more than I used to. Sometimes, just for a second, I'll catch a flare of amber light where there shouldn't be any. A faint, phantom glow in the corner of the glass. And I'll hear, under my own engine, a distant scraping that doesn't quite match the rhythm of the road. I slow down. I leave space, because out there in the dark, on that stretch by Elephant Lake, I'm never entirely sure if I'm the one clearing the way, or if something older is clearing it for me. I've been running long enough to know which mile markers you don't linger at. Name's Clay, 22 years over the road, most of it on the northern routes. Montana, the Dakotas, up around Glacier when the loads pay right and the weather doesn't look suicidal. I drive a white Kenworth T680, sleeper cab, mid-roof. Nothing flashy. 53-foot drive and usually full of paper and packaging. Stuff that doesn't care how cold it gets as long as it arrives on time. That night, late January, I was westbound on Highway 2, skirting the top edge of Montana. Midnight run. I'd fueled in Havre, grabbed a bitter cup of coffee that tasted more like burned filters than anything else, and pushed on toward Kalispell. Dispatch wanted me within striking distance of Spokane by the next afternoon. By the time I got near Glacier, the world had shrunk down to what my headlights could touch. Sky was a black dome with no stars, just low clouds, holding in the cold. Snowbanks lined both sides of the two-lane like frozen waves, higher than the hood in spots where the plows had run out of places to throw it. The asphalt between them was clean but shiny, that dark sheen that might be wet or might be ice. You only find out when the tires break loose. Outside temp on the dash read -20 degrees Fahrenheit. That's without the wind chill. Inside the cab, the heater blew dry, almost metallic heat on my boots. The air smelled like hot plastic, stale coffee, and diesel soaked into my jacket. Wipers whispered back and forth, clawing away the powder that the wind scraped off the drifting berms. CB was on squelch set. All I got was low static. No chatter. No scale talk. Nothing. I knew the stories about that stretch. Everybody does, if they've run it more than once. A certain mile marker, a certain hill, the one you don't stop on if you can help it. Guys talk about engine trouble there, strange lights, shadows cutting through fog where no trees should be. Most of it you write off as truck stop ghost stories, ways to pass the time over bad coffee. Still, the number hung in the back of my head. The blue sign flashed past my right window a few minutes later. There it was. White numbers. Reflective. Nailed to a world of snow and pine and cold. I glanced at it just long enough to register it and then turned my eyes back to the road. The hill there isn't much in daylight. Just a long, steady pull with trees on one side and a drop-off on the other, hidden under snow. At night, with winter chewing through the mountains, it feels different. Like the road narrows and the dark thickens around it. My truck had been running fine all evening. Temp steady. Oil pressure solid. I was in that autopilot state, hands loose on the wheel, eyes scanning mirrors, brain half a mile ahead of the headlights. That's when the coolant light flickered. Just a blink at first. Red symbol dipping on, then off like it was testing to see if I'd noticed. I frowned and glanced at the gauge. Needle had climbed a little, nothing scary, just higher than it had been. Could have been the grade. Could have been the fan not kicking on. The light came back. Stayed. Coolant temp started to rise. Not a gentle drift anymore. A steady climb. Come on, I muttered, easing off the throttle. The engine tone dropped from a steady hum to a strained growl, vibrating through the floor and up through the pedals. I flicked off the cruise, took control, watched the gauge. Kept climbing. Then something under the hood popped. It wasn't loud. More of a sharp crack, like a plastic pen snapping in your hand, but I felt it all the way through the steering column. A second later, white steam rolled up past the edges of the hood, lit from beneath by my headlights, thickening into clouds that blew sideways on the wind. Coolant line. Had to be. I watched the gauge spike toward the red and made my choice. I pulled onto the narrow shoulder by instinct, hazard lights ticking to life, trying to find a spot where the truck wouldn't be half in the lane. Gravel crackled under my tires, then went quiet as I slid onto packed snow. I came to a stop on a slight lean toward the ditch. I killed the engine. Silence rushed in. The difference between an idling semi and a dead one is like the difference between a beating heart and a stopped one. No vibration, no low rumble. Just the tick of metal cooling and the faint hiss of steam escaping under the hood. I grabbed my gloves and beanie from the passenger seat, zipped my jacket up to my throat, and opened the door. The cold hit like a punch. I've run in sub-zero before, but that night it felt personal. Air that didn't just sting your skin, it bit. The kind of cold that makes your nose hairs freeze and your breath feel like it's turning to glass in your lungs. The kind that says, you don't belong out here. Not for long. My boots hit the snow-packed shoulder with a crunch that echoed louder than it should have. Snow squeaked under the weight. The wind came off the trees in hard, invisible sheets, making my eyes water instantly. I walked around front, breath pluming in thick clouds. Headlights carved twin tunnels into the night, catching steam billowing up from under the hood, turning it into a glowing white veil. I popped the hood and fought it against the wind, muscles straining. Hot, sweet chemical smell hit me. Coolant cooked and sprayed everywhere. The green stuff had frozen along hoses in jagged, glassy ridges, already stiffening in the cold. One of the main lines had split open, torn like someone had grabbed it and twisted until it gave. Perfect, I muttered through chattering teeth. I knew I wasn't fixing it out there. Not at -20. Not with coolant turning to slush on contact with the air. I'd have to call roadside, get a wrecker or a service truck out. That meant waiting, out here, on the one stretch of road every old-timer tells you not to get stuck on. I dropped the hood back into place and stood there a second, letting the wind tug at my jacket, listening. No other engines. No far-off rumble of tires on snow. Just wind hissing through pine branches on the hill above, and somewhere under it, a faint creak as the truck settled on the frozen shoulder. I was about to climb back in when I heard it. Footsteps. Not my imagination. Not the random crack and slide of snow. Actual, deliberate steps. Slow. Heavy. Crunching in the snow behind me, coming from the direction of the trailer. I froze with my gloved hand on the door handle. Crunch. 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 They were close enough that I should have felt the presence already, seen a shadow sliding along the side of the trailer. My neck prickled under my collar. I turned. My headlights swept out in a wide fan, catching the side of the trailer, the sheen of snow on the shoulder, the first few rows of dark trees. And him. He was walking straight down the shoulder toward me, coming from behind the trailer. Mid-40s, maybe, beard stiff with ice, hanging in clumps. Frost had formed along his eyelashes and brows, filmed white, giving his eyes a cloudy, dead look. His skin was the color of old wax, splotched with the gray-blue of frostbite along his cheeks and nose. His clothes were wrong for the temperature. Thin canvas jacket torn at one shoulder, plaid shirt underneath half open, no hat. Jeans stiff with frozen moisture, no gloves, hands bare and cracked, fingertips dark. He moved like every joint in his body hurt. Stiff little jerks, arms hanging slightly away from his sides, knees not bending quite right. But he kept coming, straight toward my truck, straight toward me. I swallowed, fog twisting around my face. Hey! My voice sounded too loud in the empty night. You all right, man? He didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. He just kept walking, boots or what I thought were boots, planting with that steady crunch. For half a second, relief flickered. Another driver. Someone who'd pulled in behind, maybe to check on me. Hypothermic, sure, but human. Then my brain caught up with what my eyes weren't seeing. I looked down. The snow around my truck was scraped and mangled where my tires had chewed it up. Beyond that, the shoulder was smooth, a soft, wind-shaped crust leading back along the road. And leading toward me, from the darkness, just one set of footprints, deep, fresh, coming from the direction of the woods, cutting across the ditch, through the powder, up onto the shoulder. The man walking toward me didn't leave a single mark. His feet rose and fell. I could hear the sound, but the snow beneath him never indented. The surface stayed pristine, untouched, the way it looks right after a drift settles. My stomach turned over slow and cold. He stopped about 6-7 feet from me, right at the edge of my headlight's bright wash. Enough light to see him clearly, not enough to make him feel less wrong. Up close, the frostbite was worse. His lips were cracked and dark, edges of his nostrils raw. The whites of his eyes weren't really white at all. They had this cloudy, milked overcast, like cataracts. But I could tell he was looking at me, fixing on me. I forced my voice steady. You need help? You hurt. He didn't try to talk. Instead, he lifted one arm. It moved like it weighed 100 pounds, elbow jerking halfway, then again, until his hand came level with my chest. Fingers half-curled, skin split along the knuckles. He pointed at my truck. Slow, deliberate, Then, with the same jerky motion, he shifted his arm, pointed past me, up, toward the tree line on the hill above the road. I turned to look where he indicated. My headlights didn't reach that far, but the moon, hidden until then behind the clouds, slipped out just enough to silver the snow on the hill. I could see the edge of the woods, tall pines, black trunks stabbing into the night. And there, cutting across the slope, leading from the guardrail into the trees, were the footprints. Not the ghosts. These were real. Deep, narrow, the kind a panicking person makes when they're half running, half stumbling through powder. They started at a scuffed section of guardrail where the snow was crushed and dirty, like something had hit there long ago. The prints disappeared into the black between the trees. My mouth went dry. I turned back to the man. He was still pointing, first at the truck, then at the woods, back and forth. Slow metronome. His eyes never left my face. I don't know why, but in that moment, the idea came into my head, as clear as if someone had spoken it through the CB. Don't follow. The wind gusted hard, dragging a curtain of snow between us for a second. I lifted my arm to shield my face. When it cleared, he was closer. 3 feet now. Close enough that I could see the ice crystals caught in his beard. Close enough to see that the frost along his collar wasn't just from the air. It was from moisture that had frozen solid. Tears, maybe. Breath. Sweat. Up close, he smelled like old leather and something else under it. A faint, sweet rot, like clothing that's been wet too long and then frozen. I staggered a step back, boots slipping on the icy shoulder. His hand, still extended, shifted. He didn't touch me. He just lowered his finger, pointed again at my truck door. The message was clear as if he'd shouted it. Get in. Behind him, higher up on the hill, something shifted in the tree line. I heard it more than saw it. A soft, distant whump of snow collapsing somewhere in the dark, followed by a crack, like a branch breaking under weight. Then another, the kind of sound that says something big is moving under the surface, out of sight. The footprints leading into the trees seemed to vanish into that blackness like a trail into a throat. I thought about grabbing a flashlight, about climbing that hill and seeing if someone was still up there, maybe lost, maybe hurt. That's what you're supposed to do when you see tracks like that. We look out for each other out here. But every instinct I had, the same ones that kept me out of jackknifes and pileups and bad loads, screamed the same thing. Get back in the truck. Another whump drifted down from the woods. Closer this time. The man's hand didn't waver. I backed toward the cab, never taking my eyes off him. My fingers fumbled with the door handle before I got it open. I climbed up, boots clanging on the steps, heart thudding in my ears. From the driver's seat, looking down, he seemed smaller. But wrong. Wrong in a way that didn't shrink with distance. He dropped his arm. For the first time, something like relief flickered across his ruined face. Not a smile. Just the tiniest easing of whatever tension held him upright. Then the wind rose again, throwing snow across the shoulder in thick sheets. Headlights washed out. For 2-3 seconds, all I saw was white. When it cleared, the shoulder was empty. He was gone. No retreating figure. No fading shape. Just untouched snow, the side of my trailer, the open road. No footprints where he'd been standing. The only marks anywhere near my truck were my own. I sat there in the sudden silence, fingers tight on the wheel, breath ghosting the air in front of me. The heater, on low idle power, barely stirred. I don't know how long I stayed like that before I remembered my phone, called roadside, and gave them my location. Mile marker 327. I told the dispatcher, voice flat. There was a pause on the other end. Just long enough. You're near Glacier, right? She asked carefully. Yeah. Okay, driver, we'll get someone out, but it might be a while. Stay in your unit. Do not leave the vehicle, all right? Not in that cold. She didn't have to tell me twice. 2 hours later, a service truck's lights finally broke the darkness behind me. The tech climbed out, bundled to the eyeballs, breath billowing. While he patched my line and refilled the coolant, he kept glancing up at the hill. You know about 327? He asked eventually. I hesitated. Heard stories. He nodded toward the trees. Couple winters back, car went off there. Young guy. They figure he climbed out, tried to walk to the road for help. Search and rescue found his trail going into the woods. The tech's jaw clenched. They never found where it came back out. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. I made it to Kalispell the next day, late but alive. Dispatch chewed me out about downtime until I mentioned the mile marker. Then the guy on the other end got quiet and just signed off. I still run that route sometimes. Money's good. Scenery, when you can see it, is something out of a postcard. But I don't stop near 327 anymore. Not for anything short of fire. And on the nights when the temp drops and the pines stand black against the snow, I keep my eyes straight ahead. Because sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I can see someone standing on the shoulder in my mirror. Frostbitten, waiting, arm half raised like he's trying to wave me down. Or warn me off. Either way, I don't plan on finding out which. I've been out here long enough to know that not every light on the horizon is a blessing. Name's Dan. 17 years running long haul, mostly in the northern US and across into Canada. The kind of routes where winter isn't a season, it's a personality. I pull a red Peterbilt 579, mid-roof sleeper, running drive and freight. Paper, appliances, whatever'll fit and pay on time. This was on the Ontario side, winter before last. I'd crossed at Sault Ste. Marie and was pushing east along Highway 17, cutting through that endless black between small towns. Dispatch wanted me near Sudbury by morning. The forecast had said light snow. They lied. By 11:30 p.m., it wasn't snowing. It was erasing. Headlights hit a wall of white and died in it. High beams just turned everything into a glowing sheet. I stuck with low beams and fogs, watching maybe 50 feet of road at a time. The rest of the world might as well not have existed. Wind hammered the cab from the left, trying to shove 80,000 pounds into the ditch. Outside temp read -18 degrees Celsius, somewhere just below zero in Fahrenheit. But with the wind it felt like the dark itself was frozen. The heater worked overtime, blowing that dry, baked plastic heat around my legs. The cab smelled like old coffee, sweat, and the faint chemical tang of de-icer off my boots. The road was a narrow vein of gray cutting through high snowbanks. No other headlights ahead or behind. No taillights. No glow from farmhouses. Just my truck, the wind, and the wipers squealing across the windshield. My hours were bleeding out on the ELD. I watched the little digital clock tick down. 40 minutes of drive time left. Then 32. Then 26. Out here, you don't just pull over anywhere. Shoulders disappear under drifts. On a night like that, if you stop in the wrong place, you wake up with a snowplow in your bunk. I kept waiting for a rest area. Proper truck stop. Something. Nothing came. The CB was dead except for low static. No chatter. No road reports. Just that sound like someone breathing through a pillow. I was starting to get that dry, gritty feel behind my eyes, the way you do when you've been staring at snow for too long. My hands vibrated with the constant hum of the wheel. The trailer tugged now and then in the crosswind, reminding me that one mistake out here was final. My ELD beeped at 15 minutes remaining. Yeah, I muttered, though there was nobody to hear me. Find me a place and I'll stop. That's when I saw it. Off to the right, through the whiteout, a glow. Not a car, not a house light. Higher. Square. It flickered as I moved, then clarified. A sign. Rectangle. Neon halo around it. Colors dulled by the storm. As I crawled closer, the words came into focus between bursts of blowing snow. Rest, fuel, hot food. There was an arrow pointing right. I frowned. I'd run this stretch before. Not 100 times, but enough to know the big stops. The chains. A place like this, with fuel, food, and a sign that bright, should have been on my mental map. Couldn't place it. The ELD chirped again. 10 minutes. I looked at the road disappearing in front of me. At the swirling snow, the empty shoulders, the storm that wasn't letting up. Logbooks don't care about ghosts. They care about minutes. I flipped on my right indicator and eased off the throttle. The turnoff appeared like it had just been painted in front of me. A narrow lane angled off the highway, edges half buried under plowed snow. My tires dropped onto a rougher surface, packed snow over gravel. The sign buzzed louder as I approached, the neon flickering, casting sickly red and green over my hood. The F in fuel stuttered. So did my gut. I rolled up a short drive and into a lot, if you could call it that. The beam of my headlights swept across it, searching. No trucks, no cars, no tire tracks at all. Just a wide, flat expanse of snow, wind sculpted into small drifts between the pump islands. 3 fuel pumps stood in a row in front of a low building. The pumps looked old square bodies, faded decals, mechanical number wheels instead of digital displays. Their lights glowed a weak yellow. Beyond them, the building squatted in the dark. Cinderblock walls, big windows, a glass door with metal bars. The only real light came from that buzzing sign overhead. Rest, fuel, hot food. Like a promise. I coasted in slow, picked a spot near the pumps, and stopped. Engine to idle. Hazards ticking. The snow hissed against the side of the trailer. I peered out through the windshield, waiting to see someone move behind the counter. A figure cross a window, even just the flicker of a TV. Nothing. Just stillness. The pump's hoses hung stiff, rims crusted with ice. The windows of the building reflected my own headlights back at me. 2 white eyes in the dark. My ELD chimed one last time. Drive time hit 0. All right, I sighed. You win. I killed the engine. The sudden silence rang in my ears. Without the vibration of the motor, the cab felt weightless, like it was hanging in the storm. I grabbed my jacket, zipped it to my chin, pulled on my gloves and beanie, and opened the door. Cold knifed in instantly, air that felt thick, almost solid. My breath turned to a dense cloud that curled back into the cab. I climbed down, boots hitting snow with a muffled whump. It wasn't deep, maybe 6 inches, but under it was hard, frozen ground. The wind pushed at my back, wanting me to move. The sign above buzzed and hummed, flickering. I could hear it over the wind, that high electric crackle of old neon. I walked toward the entrance, each step leaving a clear, dark print. The building loomed up out of the snow, more rundown up close. The siding was stained, paint peeled from the metal doorframe. A faded, open 24 hours sticker clung crookedly to the glass. Inside, the lights were on. Fluorescent tubes glared down from the ceiling. I could see rows of shelves, what looked like a small eating area to the right. No movement. The door handle burned cold against my glove. It stuck for a second, then gave with a tired click. I stepped inside. A little bell on the frame jingled weakly above my head. The first thing that hit me wasn't the warmth. There wasn't much of that. It was the smell. Old coffee, mildew, stale air that hadn't moved in years. Under it all was something sour and metallic, like rust and damp concrete. The heater, if there was one, didn't make a sound. I could hear the wind pushing against the walls, a low moan. The fluorescents hummed, flickering every few seconds, casting everything in a harsh yellow-white that made it feel less alive, not more. Dust lay on the shelves in a thin gray film. What was left of the stock looked wrong. Chips in bags so sun-faded you could barely read the logos. Candy bars with wrappers from brands that had rebranded years ago. A spinning rack of maps, edges curled. No one's touched them in a decade. To the right, a diner-style counter stretched under a row of hanging lamps. 4 bolted-down stools stood in front of it. Behind, a pass-through window opened into a kitchen area, or what had been one. The stainless steel was dull, spotted with corrosion. A coffee pot sat on a hot plate, half full of black liquid that looked thick as oil. The clock on the wall above the counter showed 3:17. The second hand wasn't moving. I took a breath. Tasted like a forgotten basement. Hello. My voice sounded flat in the space. Anybody here? Silence. In that half second, the place looked different. The ceiling tiles above the eating area sagged, stained brown and black. One hung down, broken, exposing dark beams. The window to my left was cracked, a lace of fractures running from corner to corner. Snow feathered in around the frame, dusting the sill. The fluorescents snapped back to full brightness. The stains were gone, The ceiling looked whole again. The window was unbroken. The hum came back. The coffee smell seemed stronger. Under it, the mildew thickened. I stared at the ceiling, then the window, breath shallow. My mind tried to explain it. Power surge, tired eyes, nerves. Then I saw the calendar. It was hanging by the door behind the counter, just visible between the pass-through and a crooked no check sign. A photo of a lake in summer. Month at the top, days in neat squares, the year at the bottom. My chest tightened. The lights flickered again. This time they went all the way out. Wind roared against the walls, louder now, like it had been muted before and someone took their hand off the volume knob. Freezing air rushed through the room, carrying snow with it. I could feel it sting my cheeks, bite at the sweat starting under my collar. For a moment, the only light came from my truck's headlights, bleeding in through the front windows. In that stark, white beam, the truth showed itself. The far window was shattered. Not cracked, gone. Jagged teeth of glass clung to the frame. Snow blew straight in, piling against the inside wall. The tables near it were overturned. One leg snapped. The counter had a long, burned streak across it, black char running up the back wall toward the dead clock. The shelves were mostly empty. What little stock remained had slumped into shapeless piles. The coffee pot on the hot plate was a cloudy, cracked thing, its contents frozen into a black, fractured lump. A section of the ceiling had collapsed in front of the kitchen door, insulation and broken tile scattered across the floor. My own footprints were there, clear and wet. Under them, faint but still visible, were others. Heavier, wider stride, leading from the front door toward the back. Then a chaotic mess at the far side of the counter, as if someone had slipped, scrambled, tried to turn around in a panic. My breath fogged in front of my face, each exhale a ragged cloud. I turned toward the door. "Cold out there, driver?" The voice came again, right behind my left ear. Warm breath ghosted across my cheek. Warm in this frozen tomb, smelling of burnt coffee and something sour and old. Every muscle seized. My fingers went numb. I didn't turn. I ran. My boots slipped on the tile. I caught myself on a shelf, sending a line of dust-caked candy bars skittering to the floor. The front door loomed ahead, a rectangle of pale headlight glow through dirty glass. Behind me something moved, not footsteps, more like the drag of weight over debris. A chair scraping, a low, wet cough that might have been the wind worming through broken walls or something trying to speak through lungs full of ice. The bell over the door didn't jingle when I shoved it open. Outside, the lot had changed. The pumps were husks now, outlines against the snow, metal eaten through with rust. One leaned at an angle, hose torn, nozzle buried. The sign that had promised rest of fuel, hot food, was just a tall, crooked pole. Its plastic face shattered, letters gone. Only the metal frame remained, twisting as the wind pushed it. My truck's headlights cut across an empty field of white. The building I'd just run out of sagged under its own weight. The roof had partially caved in on the right side. One of the big front windows was a jagged hole. Snow lay in drifts up against the walls, already half covering the lower panes. For a second, I saw both versions at once. The lit, lonely stop and the ruin laid over each other like bad film. Then my eyes settled on what was really there. I slogged through the snow toward my rig, heart hammering against my ribs. My boots punched deep now, up past my ankles with each step. Felt like the ground had sunk while I was inside. By the time I reached the truck, my lungs burned. I grabbed the door handle with fingers that didn't want to work and hauled myself up into the cab. Inside, the air was colder than I'd left it, frost already beginning to film the inside of the windshield. My breath plumed thick. The keys hung from the ignition where I'd left them. I turned them. The starter groaned slower than it should have, churning through cold, thickened oil. "Come on," I whispered. On the third crank, the engine caught. The familiar rumble rolled through the cab, a living thing pushing back the dead quiet. I cranked the heat and headlights, flipped the hazards on, and dropped it into gear. As I turned back toward the entrance lane, I glanced once at the building. In the brief sweep of my high beams, through the empty window, I could have sworn I saw someone sitting at the counter. Just a silhouette hunched over, head bowed, like they were still waiting for coffee that would never pour. Then the angle changed, and there was only dark and drifting snow. The lane back to the highway wasn't a lane anymore. Just a shallow cut in the drifts where my own tire tracks led out to the road. Beyond that, the Trans-Canada was a gray smudge in the storm. When my tires rolled up onto the asphalt again, it felt like breaking through a skin. I drove. I didn't look in the mirrors. 8 miles down, another set of lights appeared, low, warm, and steady. A real truck stop, one I knew. Parking lot packed with reefers and flatbeds. Fuel island busy. Plows idling at the far end. The kind of place where you can hear laughter through the walls and smell grease from the kitchen. I pulled in, hands finally starting to shake now that the danger had a line behind it instead of in front of it. Inside, in the bright, crowded restaurant, a waitress poured me coffee that smelled alive. A couple other drivers sat nearby talking about the storm, the roads, the usual. I mentioned, casual as I could, that I'd tried to stop earlier. Gave them the rough kilometer mark. Place with a sign out by itself. Big letters. Rest, fuel, hot food. The guy across from me, older, thick beard, Ontario plates on his hat, stopped stirring his soup. There's nothing out there, he said. Not for 50 clicks either way. Used to be something, another driver added quietly. Northline service, C-store and diner, old gas pumps, propane tanks. Place burned down in the late 90s. Bad blizzard, power went pilot light or something. Took half the building and a couple poor bastards with it. They never reopened. Town made him pull the sign down after some tourist wrecked trying to turn in. The hairs on my neck prickled. When? I asked. My voice felt far away. Long time ago, man, the older driver said. Before I got my license. That whole lot's just snow and brush now. Been that way for years. I drove by that spot again in daylight a month later. No driveway, no graded lot, just a shoulder, then open field rolling away from the highway, white and empty, a line of trees in the distance. No sign, no pumps, no building, nothing. But every winter since, when I'm out in a storm and my hours are bleeding away, and I see a glow through the whiteout where there shouldn't be one, I keep rolling, because I already stopped once at a truck stop that wasn't there. And I'm not sure you get to leave a place like that twice. No cooler compressors, no low radio in the back, just the hum of lights and the wind scratching at the seams of the building. I stepped farther in, boots squeaking on old tile. My footprints trailed wet behind me. I looked down out of habit, checking for a floor mat. That's when the voice came. Cold out there, driver? Came from behind the counter. Not loud, not whispery, just close. Like the way someone sounds when they lean on the other side of a diner pass-through and talk over the sizzle of the grill. Every hair on my arms lifted under my jacket. I turned slowly toward the counter. Nobody stood there. The space behind it was empty. No clerk, no cook. Just the stained coffee pot, the dead clock, and a doorway leading into shadow. My heart thudded harder. A heavy, slow beat I could feel in my throat. I swallowed. Yeah, I said, because my brain didn't know what else to do. Storm's bad. My voice bounced back to me from the far wall. No answer came with it. I took another step, crunching on something. I looked down. The tile around my boots was dusty, except for where my prints cut through. There were no other footprints. None behind the counter. None leading to the back door. It was like nobody had walked this floor in years. But I had heard the bell when I came in. Overhead, the lights flickered. For a heartbeat, the room went dim. Not fully dark, just drained. Shadows lengthened. The humming stopped. They tell you Alaska either hardens you up or throws you out. Name's Luke. I've been hauling tankers and dry vans up here for going on 14 years now. Fuel up to Fairbanks, freight down to Anchorage, runs out toward Talk and back. Winter's just part of the deal, chains, block heaters, diesel that gels if you blink at it wrong. My rig's a beat-up white Kenworth W900 with a heater that growls louder than the engine some nights and a driver's side mirror with a dent in the frame from a moose that didn't feel like yielding. Back pallet on this load had a blue tarp cinched over a stack of totes. Straps humming in the wind every time the gusts got bad. This was mid-January, deep winter. I was eastbound on the Talk Cutoff, that stretch of highway, one that feels more like a road someone forgot to finish. No shoulders worth a damn. No real towns. Just black spruce, snow, and the kind of cold that chews through steel. It was around 3:30 in the morning. Outside temp on the dash read -28 degrees Fahrenheit. The sky was a low ceiling of cloud. No stars, no moon. The only light came from my headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the darkness and the soft green smear of the northern lights trying to bleed through the overcast. Inside the cab, it was its own little world. Heater on full, blowing hot dry air at my boots. The windshield had a film of frost around the edges, where the defroster couldn't quite keep up. The air smelled like stale coffee, diesel off my jacket, and that dusty, plastic heater smell you only get when it's been running flat out for hours. The CB sat above me, tuned to 19 out of habit. Up here, channel 19 is more than just noise. Keeps you awake. Guys call out moose on the road, black ice patches, closing times at the few diners left. On most stretches, you hear at least a little chatter. Cussing at the weather. Jokes that aren't funny but keep you from thinking too hard about how far you are from help. But around the Talk Cutoff, there's a run where 19 goes quiet. Not quiet like nobody's talking right now. Quiet like nobody will talk. An unwritten rule. Dead air. I'd heard stories different ways. Some talked about weird interference. Others whispered about voices that aren't there. Most just said the same thing. Once you're on the cutoff at night, you listen, you don't key up. I'd always chalked it up to superstition. Truck stop lore. Guys trying to spook rookies. That night, I was tired enough to understand why they needed ghost stories. The road unfurled in an endless gray ribbon. Snowbanks rose up on either side like frozen walls. My headlights kept catching the same twisted black shapes of trees, over and over, until it all felt like a loop. Wipers thumped a steady rhythm. The tires hummed low on hardpack, with the occasional faint hiss when we crossed a patch of polished ice. The trailer tugged just enough in the crosswind to remind me it was there. Out here, the temperature outside the glass felt like something alive, pressing against the cab, trying to get in. I rolled past a small green sign half swallowed in snow. Couldn't see the text, but I knew where I was. The cutoff. Static hissed softly from the CB speaker. No voices, no background music. Just that faint, white noise like an empty room breathing. I left it on anyway. Habit. The digital clock on the dash flipped to 3:45 a.m. That's when the static changed. It sharpened, tightened, like someone turned the squelch knob without touching it. Little pops and crackles stitched themselves into the hiss. I glanced up at the radio. My hand hovered near the dial, but I didn't touch it. The sound thinned, then a whisper slid through. "I'm stuck." It was so soft I almost thought I imagined it. Just a scrap of voice buried in static. My shoulders tensed. I leaned toward the speaker. "Say again." I brought the mic up out of reflex. "Break 19, I only caught you're stuck. You got a location." For a second, there was nothing. Just the storm outside and the low drone of the engine. Then the channel crackled. Heavy breathing seeped through first. Shaky. Wet, like the air was freezing as it came out of the lungs. Then the same voice, a little clearer. I'm stuck. Male. Young. That was my first impression. 20s, maybe. No accent I could place. Just that flat North American tone that could be from anywhere between Alberta and Ohio. I glanced at the GPS, though it's half useless out here. Then at the dark beyond my headlights. "All right, buddy," I said, keeping it calm. The way you do when someone's already panicked. "Where are you stuck? You on the cutoff? You see any mile markers?" Static chewed off the first part of his reply. Then, "I see your lights. Don't leave." Those words landed in my chest like ice. My eyes went straight to the mirrors. Headlights glared back in the glass, reflecting from the snow. Beyond that, nothing. No silhouettes of other trucks. No glow of hazard lights, just the faint impression of my trailer, the swirling powder in the beams, and then black. I checked again. Left mirror. Right. Fairing mirror. All clean. I pressed the mic button anyway. You're seeing my lights? What you driving, friend? Pickup? Rig. I scanned the sides of the road now, too, looking for any hint of metal in the ditches, anything that could be catching my beams. Silence stretched so long I thought I'd lost him. Then the voice came back, closer somehow, like he'd leaned in toward his mic. You're in the white Kenworth. Old W9. A shallow breath. Driver's side mirrors dented. Left side. My stomach dropped. I looked at the mirror out of pure instinct. Same dent. Same slight angle where the frame never quite sat right again after that moose clipped me 2 winters back. You got a blue tarp on the back pallet, the voice whispered. Right rear. One strap's humming. I can hear it in the wind. The hum was there, faint, at the edge of hearing. That low, taut string tone you stop noticing until someone mentions it. My grip on the wheel tightened until my fingers hurt inside my gloves. The snow outside was heavy enough that even my own trailer washed out into a gray mass 15 feet behind me. There was no way in hell anyone could be far enough away to be stuck and still see that kind of detail through this storm. I swallowed, mouth suddenly dry. All right, I said carefully. You picked that up from a scale house or you close by? You hurt? You inside a vehicle? On the other end, someone exhaled a shaky breath right into the mic. It fuzzed the channel. I'm cold, he said. The words trembled, like his jaw was shaking. Don't leave. Please. I've been calling. No one answers. You answered. A faint tap sounded under his voice. Not rhythmic. More like something gently hitting plastic. Fingers? Teeth chattering against a mic? My throat tightened. Listen, if you can see my lights, tell me where. Ahead of you? Behind? Off your left? Right? My eyes cut to the ditches again. Snowbanks rose up like frozen waves. No shape that looked like a wreck. No faint glow of hazard flashers buried under powder. Static chewed his next words into little pieces. I caught off the road, drifted, and something that sounded like door won't open. Then, clear as if he was sitting in my passenger seat. I'm down in the dark, but I see you. Please, don't drive away. My right boot pressed a little harder on the throttle. Not enough to speed up. Just enough to remind myself the truck was still under my control. Outside, the night felt thicker. The green smear of the aurora vanished behind the clouds completely. The road narrowed until it felt like I was driving through a tunnel carved into an endless snowbank. Who are you? I asked softly. I don't know why I dropped my voice. It just felt wrong to say it loud. What's your handle, partner? Silence. The static hissed like wind across a graveyard. Then the whisper came back, changed. There was something warped in it now, like the sound was being pulled through deep water. I didn't die far from you. A cold sweat broke out under my jacket, despite the temperature. My fingers went numb around the mic. Say again. My voice shook, just once. You didn't what? Didn't die far from you, he repeated. Right down there, off the side. I see your taillights. Every time. The last 2 words stretched, frayed at the edges. Behind his whisper, something else crept into the channel. A soft, wet sound, like someone trying to breathe past frozen cloth. My eyes flicked to the right ditch again. For a second, in the headlight's far edge, the snow seemed wrong. Not smooth, not wind-whipped. A long, shallow depression running parallel to the road, partly filled in. A darker line under the powder, like the shadow of something buried. I blinked. The shape vanished, swallowed by the storm. On the CB, the breathing hitched, turned into a ragged little sob. Please, he said. I see your lights. I don't want to be alone again. The way he said again made something in my chest twist. I thought about stopping, about pulling over, hitting the hazards, walking the shoulder with a flashlight, checking the ditches, checking for a truck on its side, a car half hidden, a patch of snow that didn't look quite right. I also thought about what minus 28 degrees Fahrenheit does to exposed skin. How fast your fingers stop working. How many stories I'd already heard from this very stretch about guys who stepped out just for a minute and never made it back to their cab. And I thought about the fact that no power in the world should be letting the stranger describe my dented mirror, my tarp, the hum of my straps, when I couldn't see so much as a shape behind me. Dispatch, have you on a call? I tried one last angle. You got a unit en route? Wreckers? Troopers? He made a sound then that I still hear sometimes when the heater fan winds down and the truck goes quiet. Started as a sob. Then it turned into this strangled, choking noise, like someone crying and trying not to. Breath-catching, voice cracking. I called, he whispered. Called and called on 19. Burned my battery. Screamed till my throat bled. Nobody came. Nobody. The voice broke apart into static for a second. When it slipped back through, it was higher, more panicked. Don't do it again. Don't leave. Please. I see your lights. I see your... His whisper rose into a thin, hysterical cry. The radio speaker crackled under the strain, filling the cab with a mix of static and wordless, desperate sound. It wasn't loud like yelling. It was worse. Choked. The kind of crying you hear when someone's past fear and somewhere else entirely. Something in me finally snapped. My thumb slid off the transmit button. I reached up with my other hand and turned the CB volume knob hard to 0. The cab fell into mechanical silence. Just engine, wind, wipers. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it shaking the wheel. My mouth tasted like metal. For a long half-minute, I drove with the radio dead, eyes straight ahead, white tunnel of snow swallowing everything else. Then, very softly, from the silent speaker, I still see you. The sound was barely there. A ghost of a voice leaking through circuitry that should have been mute. I reached up and cut the power completely. The little orange display went dark. Whatever came through after that, if anything did, I didn't hear it. I drove the rest of the cutoff in a bubble of my own engine noise, hands clenched, eyes dry and wide. The night outside pressed close to the glass. A few times, I thought I saw a glow in the right mirror that wasn't mine. A pale smear low to the ground, like a truck's clearance lights half buried in the ditch. I didn't look too long. By the time first light bled into the clouds, I was rolling into talk, muscles stiff, stomach in knots. I pulled into the little cafe that everyone hits because there isn't much else, parked among a handful of other rigs, and killed the engine. Inside, it smelled like bacon grease, burnt coffee, and people. Real warmth. Real noise. I took a corner stool, wrapped my hands around a mug, and didn't say much. An old-timer I recognized by face, if not by name, slid onto the stool beside me. Big parka, beard gone mostly white. His hat had a log truck company logo on it that had been out of business for years. You run the cutoff last night? He asked, eyeing the frost still clinging to my jacket. Yeah. He glanced down at the map taped under the glass on the counter. A laminated highway map of Alaska, coffee-stained and creased. His finger tapped a point along the thin line of the talk cutoff. Right about here? He asked. His nail clicked on a bend I remembered blowing past around for in the morning. I nodded, slowly. He looked at me for a long moment, something like understanding in his eyes. That's where the rookie died, he said quietly. 3 winters back. Slid off in a storm. Truck rolled just enough to pin the door. CB was still good. He called on 19 for hours, they say. Nobody wanted to break the silence out there. Too many damn stories. By the time someone paid attention, the battery was dead and so was he. The old man's gaze stayed on the map. Last words the troopers pulled off his radio log were, I see your lights. They found tire marks on the road above him. Somebody passed within a couple hundred yards and kept right on going. He finally looked up at me. Channel's been mostly dead through there ever since. Folks hear things. Some answer. Once. He held my stare a beat longer. Most don't key up at all anymore. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything that wouldn't sound small. I still run the talk cutoff. Freight doesn't care about ghosts. But I don't talk on 19 through that stretch now. I leave it on, volume low, just enough to hear the static breathe. And every so often, somewhere around 3:30 in the morning, the hiss will sharpen. The squelch will crackle on its own. A fragment of sound will slip through, a breath, a note of something like a sob. I keep my hands on the wheel, my eyes on the road, because I know that if I ever hear that voice clearly again, if I ever hear those words, "I see your lights," I might not have it in me to drive away a second time. I've been out here long enough to know there are some people you can't get home. Name's Ryder. I pull reefers and dry vans mostly, running I-90 between Wyoming, South Dakota, and out toward Minnesota. 13 years behind the wheel, most of it in winter, dodging black ice, wildlife, and bad decisions. This was on the South Dakota stretch, somewhere past Wall, headed east toward the Badlands. December, 3 days before Christmas. Road was half empty. Everyone with sense was already where they needed to be. It was about 1 in the morning. The storm hadn't fully committed yet, but it was working on it. Snow came down in hard, slanting lines, pushed sideways by a steady wind that made the trailer sway just enough to keep me alert. Outside temp sat at -10 degrees Fahrenheit, dropping a degree every half hour. I was in my usual ride, a Freightliner Cascadia, white, no fairings, a little beat, heater on full blast at my feet. The cab smelled like spilled coffee, cold French fries, and diesel soaked into my coveralls. The dash lights were dimmed down, radio turned off. Just the low hum of the engine, the faint hiss of the tires on snow-dusted asphalt, and the occasional squeak of the wipers. Badlands at night are a different planet. The land drops away into dark shapes on either side of the highway, like something big took bites out of the earth and left the edges sharp. Even under snow you can feel the emptiness out there, just past where the headlights die. I was fighting that late-night drift. Not sleep exactly, just that trance you get after a few hundred miles of white lines. I topped off in Rapid City, grabbed a stale sandwich and a thermos of coffee that tasted like burnt filter, and pushed back onto the interstate. No other trucks in sight, no oncoming traffic, just me and the wind. That's when I saw him. At first he was just a shape in the shoulder fog. My headlights caught something darker than the snow, low and still, and my hands tightened on the wheel. Deer? Tire? Piece of retread? I eased off the throttle, eyes narrowing, trying to make sense of the outline. Then he stepped forward. 1 foot up out of the drift, then the other. Snow up to his knees. Arm lifting, thumb out. Classic hitchhiker pose, except there was nothing casual about it. He was standing half in my lane, half in the shoulder, turned directly into my headlights. Jacket zipped to his chin, hood shoved back. Dark hair crusted with frost. His free hand hugged tight to his chest like he was holding himself together. His eyes, even from a distance, the look hit me. Desperate. Not missed my bus desperate. Something deeper. Every rule I've taught myself flared in my head at once. Don't pick up hitchhikers. Not alone. Not at night. Not in a storm on a dead stretch of highway. My foot still drifted toward the brake. You tell yourself things at 3 in the morning you don't tell yourself at noon. Like, if that was you out there, would you want every truck to blow by? I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me but darkness and swirling snow. I downshifted, feathered the brakes, threw my hazards on. The trailer gave me a little wag, thinking about it, then fell back in line. Tires crunched on packed snow as I eased onto the shoulder. He didn't move until I came almost level with him. Then he stumbled forward, more falling than walking, boots punching deep into the drift. When he reached the passenger door, he slapped his gloved hand against it once, weak, like he wasn't sure he'd make it any farther. Up close he looked worse. Mid-20s, maybe, cheeks chapped raw, lips blue-gray. Frost rimmed his eyelashes. His jacket, a tan work coat, was soaked dark at the bottom, heavy with half-frozen snow. Jeans stiff, cuffs clotted with ice. No hat, no scarf. I leaned over and popped the lock, shoved the door open. Cold hit me like a wall, slamming into the cab, carrying that sharp, metallic smell of snow and road salt. "Come on," I said. "Get in." He climbed up slow, like every joint hurt. Boots on the step, one knee. Then he swung himself onto the seat and yanked the door shut with a clumsy, shaky grip. His teeth chattered so hard his jaw blurred. "Tej, thank you," he muttered, voice shredded. "God, Tej, thank you." His breath should have fogged the air. Didn't. I noticed it in a small, detached corner of my brain. The heater was blasting, yeah, but I just opened the door to a freezer. My own breath was still puffing faintly white. His came out invisible. Water dripped from his jacket onto the floor mat. It should have started to melt, but it just sat there, beads of ice clinging to the fabric, shining but not softening. I put the truck back in gear, pulled us onto the highway, and brought it back up to a cautious 50. The Badlands slid by on either side as low black shapes under the snow. Out of habit, I reached over and nudged the passenger side vent toward him, letting it blast hot air straight across his chest. "You picked a hell of a night to walk," I said, keeping my tone light. He huddled into himself, elbows tucked tight. If he felt the heat, he didn't show it. "Where you headed?" I asked after a beat. "There's not much between here and Sioux Falls." He swallowed Adam's apple jerking. His eyes stayed locked on the road ahead, wide and unblinking. "Home," he whispered. "I want to go home." Something about the way he said it made the hair on my forearms stand up. "Yeah? Where's home?" I pressed. "East? West? I can get you to the next town at least." He didn't answer. The heater kept roaring. The cab should have been getting stifling by then. Normally I'd be cracking a window. But a chill lingered on the right side, seeping through the dash, through the seat. Felt like sitting next to a block of ice. I sneaked a glance at him. Tears had frozen on his cheeks. Not fresh ones forming, these were solid. Twin tracks of ice clinging from his lower eyelids down over the raw skin, catching the dash light, unchanging. His lashes were clumped with frost. His lips moved slightly, like he was murmuring something only he could hear. His clothes still glistened with wet. Drops clung to his jacket. None of them rolled, none fell. They just sat there, perfectly shaped beads of ice. "Hey!" I tried again. "You got a name?" Slowly, like it hurt. His head turned a fraction in my direction. Up close, his eyes didn't look blue or brown. They looked pale, like the color had been washed out by cold. They went right over me like he was looking through the windshield, through the hood, at something far beyond. "Almost made it," he muttered. "Road was right there." He lifted one trembling hand and pointed ahead, toward the black no place the highway cut through. My stomach nodded. "What happened?" I asked before I could stop myself. He blinked. The ice at the corners of his eyes didn't crack. "Storm came fast," he whispered. "Car died. Thought I could walk. See the lights. Go home." His voice thinned, trailing off. So cold. The wipers squeaked, dragging across a new layer of snow. The Badlands fell away to my right, a long dark drop beyond the guardrail. On the CB, I caught a flicker of static. Just a pop, then nothing. "You from around here?" I pushed, trying to ground myself back in trucker logic. "Wall? Interior? Badlands campground." His hand curled slowly back into his chest, fingers claw-like. Don't leave me again," he whispered. My knuckles had gone white on the wheel. We rolled past a mileage sign. The green board flashed ghostly in the headlight beam. Sioux Falls 300-something. The edges were rimed with frost. I risked another look at him. He was staring dead ahead again. Tears frozen. Lips parted. If not for the barely perceptible rise and fall of his chest, he could have been a statue. "Hey," I said softer. "We'll get you somewhere warm. There's a way station coming up, maybe a truck stop after. Someone can help you from there." For the first time, he reacted. His head snapped toward me, just a fraction too fast. The motion didn't feel human. Felt skipped, like a few frames were missing. "Didn't make it," he said. "Didn't make it last time. Snow covered the road. Couldn't see. Saw the lights. You drove past. You all drove past." The last word came out as a ragged hiss. A mile marker slid past my peripheral vision. The number pinged something in the back of my mind. A story half heard over coffee. A warning about a stranded sedan and a body they found stiff in a drift not far from here years back. I focused on the road, on the feel of the wheel, on the rhythm of the tires. 1 more mile. I'd pull into the way station, get this kid inside, shove coffee in his hands, let someone else figure out the rest. Snow thickened. The world shrank down to my headlights and the green glowing dash. I blinked. Just once. Just a normal human blink. When my eyes opened, the passenger seat was empty. The seatbelt hung loose, unused. The door handle sat in its locked position. The floor mat was dry. No puddles, no clumps of half-melted snow. The vent still pointed where he'd been, blasting heat across nothing. But the air on that side was cold enough to make my teeth ache. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My mind scrambled for answers. Had I imagined him? Was it some kind of microsleep and dream hybrid? Did I hallucinate a whole person in my cab? Then I saw it. On the inside of the passenger window, where no one's hand had been since I'd wiped it down in Rapid City, frost had bloomed. Not random crystals. Not the usual feathered patterns. A print. Fingers splayed. Palm pressed flat. The outline faint and already fading, but there. On the glass. From the inside. I kept driving. My hands shook on the wheel. The heater roared, but the chill stayed glued to that side of the cab until the glow of the way station finally appeared ahead, hazy through the storm. I pulled in, rolled over the scale, and parked where they directed. My legs felt rubbery climbing down out of the cab. Inside the little building, the air was warm and stale, smelling like burnt coffee and copier toner. The officer on duty was late middle-aged, tired eyes, mustache starting to go gray. We made small talk about the storm, the roads. My mouth moved on autopilot. Then, without really planning to, I said, "You ever pick up hitchhikers out here? On the interstate by the Badlands?" He gave me a look that lingered a second too long. "No, sir," he said. "Can't say that I do." "Why?" I told him. Not everything. Not the frost handprint. Not the way the air froze. Not the impossible way he knew the dark. Just enough. The hitchhiker in the snow, how cold he was, how he vanished. The officer listened quietly, eyes losing focus like he was watching something behind my shoulder. When I finished, he didn't laugh. Didn't say I was overtired. He turned to the corkboard on the wall behind him. It was cluttered with notices, DOT bulletins, weather advisories, handwritten ads for used trucks. In the bottom corner, half covered by a truck wash flyer, was a faded missing person poster. He pulled the flyer aside. The man in the grainy photo wore a tan work coat, dark hair, awkward smile, younger than the version that had sat in my cab, but the face was the same. Same jaw, same eyes. The print along the bottom was washed out, but I could still make out the year. 20 years back. Got caught in a whiteout, the officer said. Car died on him. Tried to walk it. They figure he got disoriented. Wandered along the interstate a while. A couple drivers reported seeing someone on the shoulder, but by the time troopers got there, he was already buried up in a drift. He tapped the photo. Never found him alive, he said. Just his body, not too far from where you said you stopped. Every few winters, some driver comes in here looking like you do. Tells me they picked up a hitchhiker who didn't quite belong. He let that hang in the warm air between us. I drove out of there after my 10, sun hanging pale and distant over the snow-covered Badlands. The highway looked harmless in daylight, just another strip of asphalt in a world of white and rock. But I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. Not out there. Still, some nights, when the wind hits the cab just right and the road drops away into darkness on either side, I'll feel it, that subtle shift like weight settling into the passenger seat. I'll catch, in the corner of my eye, the idea of someone sitting there, staring straight ahead. And every time the Badlands rise up on the horizon, I keep one eye on the shoulder, half afraid I'll see him again, and half afraid I won't. I run enough mountain passes to know which ones hate you back. Name's Cole. 15 years hauling out of Denver, building materials, machinery, refrigerated loads, Whatever dispatch decides needs to cross the spine of Colorado at the worst possible hour. My ride's a blue Kenworth T680 with a 53-foot reefer on the hook. Jake brakes loud enough to wake God when they're working and useless when the ice really sets in. The stretch I'm talking about, they call it Devil's Pass. It's not on the tourist maps under that name. On paper, it's just another high two-lane with a couple of tight switchbacks, a cliff face on one side and a straight drop on the other. But you talk to anyone who's hauled steel or groceries over that ridge in winter, they don't call it by its route number. It's just the pass. That night, I was westbound out of Pueblo, trying to make it over before another system dropped in. Weather apps said light snow, gusts. The DOT signage at the base told the truth. Chain law in effect. High winds, blowing snow. I'd already thrown iron in the chain-up area. Fingers numb, knees wet, that fine grind of grit between glove and link. The smell of cold metal, diesel vapors, and your own breath bouncing back under the hood of your jacket. I checked my straps, banged the ice off the airlines, and started the climb. By the time I hit the first serious grade, it was full whiteout. Snow didn't fall so much as attack. It came sideways, driven by a wind that had been screaming down that canyon since long before there were roads. My low beams pushed out maybe 2 feet, maybe 3. Beyond that, nothing. Just a wall of white beating itself against the glass. The wind howled around the cab, moaning in the mirror brackets, punching the side of the trailer hard enough to make it lean. Every gust came with a low thud you could feel through the floor. The heater hummed on high, blowing dry heat at my boots and hands. The cab smelled like hot plastic, wet rubber, and the bitter coffee cooling in the cup holder. CB on 19 was mostly dead. Just a thin hiss, no chatter. Occasionally a burst of static when someone too far away keyed up, their words eaten before they got to me. I settled into that slow motion mode that keeps you alive on bad nights. Crawl it, don't fight it. Gear down. Let the engine do the work. Hands light on the wheel, eyes glued to the faint ghost of the center line when it appeared, or the suggestion of the right edge when it didn't. On my left, a rock wall should have been there. On my right, I knew was nothing but air and darkness. A drop that went a long way down through broken pine and rock to the creek far below. The guardrail was the only thing between 80,000 pounds of truck and forever, and even that's just a suggestion when ice gets involved. The pass earned its nickname from Rex. Lots of them. Locals still talk about the cattle hauler that went over in the 90s and was still shedding bones every spring thaw. Or the tourist coach that punched through the rail in a March storm, taking everyone with it. You listen long enough at a diner near the base, you hear about cars that just didn't come down. I'd heard the stories. You never think you're signing up to be one. About halfway up, grade kicked steeper. You feel it first in your gut, then in the drop in RPMs. I nudged the shifter, dropped a gear, listened to the engine's note deepen. The trailer tugged and vibrated, chains clinking a constant metallic rattle against the packed snow. Wind roared around the cab like it was trying to peel the doors off. Visibility shrank even more. My world shrunk to a little cone of light and the red glow of my dash. The rest of the universe didn't exist. That was when the CB cracked. Just one sharp pop, like someone had slapped the mic, then back to static. My shoulders tensed. I glanced up at the radio out of habit. Channel still on 19, gain where I'd left it. Anyone else up here in this mess? I tried thumb brushing the transmit. My voice sounded smaller in the confined cab than I liked. Static hissed, then smoothed out again. No reply. I let go of the mic, wrapped both hands back around the wheel. Fingers tight in my gloves, leather creaking a little. The wind hit from the right harder than before. The truck leaned just enough to make my stomach flip. I corrected by feel, letting the front tires find whatever traction they could on the invisible road. Somewhere ahead, in the white thickness, shapes started to form. Not solid, just impressions at the very edge of my headlight throw. My brain tried to make them into pine trunks, rock outcroppings, signage. They always vanished before I could pin them down. I told myself it was snow eddies. Brain tricks. Nothing else to look at, so it starts inventing things. The grade eased for a moment, then curled left. You don't see Devil's Pass turns, you feel them. The way your stomach shifts. the way the steering wheel pulls under your fingers. I turned with it, slow, watching for any hint of the guardrail. When it appeared out of the white, I almost hit the brakes. My headlights poured over chrome bolts and scuffed metal, less than an arm's length from my right mirror. I hadn't realized I'd drifted that far. One more foot, maybe two, and I'd be kissing that rail. I breathed out slow, easing a hair back toward the center. The trailer followed like a stubborn dog, chains scraping. The wind screamed louder. Somewhere under it, you could hear ice particles hitting the cab. A steady, fine sandblasting sound, like driving through a frozen waterfall. I was maybe a half-mile from the summit when I saw him. At first, he was just an interruption in the snow. A darker vertical slash where there shouldn't be one, perched right at the edge of my headlight reach. The closer I crawled, the clearer it got. He was standing on the guardrail, not behind it, not leaning, on it. Boots planted on the narrow metal beam, body perfectly straight, arms relaxed at his sides, like he'd stepped up onto a curb. Head tilted slightly down the canyon, like he was listening to something far below. He was too still. The human body in that kind of wind doesn't stay statue still. You brace, you tilt, your coat flaps, your shoulders hunch. He did none of that. The storm tore at my truck hard enough to make it shudder. His jacket, dark, couldn't tell the color, hung straight. My chest tightened. I hit the air horn. The blast shattered the quiet inside the cab, rolled out into the storm in a deep, angry bellow. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't turn, just stood there on that strip of metal like he'd grown out of it. The road was too narrow to swerve much on, too icy to try anything sudden. I dropped another gear, let the truck slow to a crawl, hazard lights ticking. My headlights full-on caught him now. He was in his 30s maybe, hard to tell under the rime of frost on his cheeks and eyebrows. No hat, short hair plastered with snow, eyes dark and deep-set, fixed on nothing I could see. His clothes looked wrong for the night, no high-vis, no heavy parka, just a work jacket, jeans, boots. He was dry. The snow that hammered my windshield and smeared across my hood didn't seem to stick to him. It whipped around his shoulders, through his hair, but his jacket stayed mostly clear, as if the storm was still thinking about whether to touch him. My front bumper drew level with him. I could have reached out and brushed his knees if the window had been open. "Hey!" I shouted, even though I knew he couldn't hear me through the glass and the wind. "Get down from there." His head turned. The movement was slow, almost curious. He didn't look at my cab. He looked down the line of my trailer instead, tracking the length of the rig, then past it into the white blur behind. Then he stepped, not down onto the shoulder. He stepped out into empty air beyond the rail like there was another lane hanging there in the void. One foot, then the other, the same casual pace you'd use crossing a parking lot. There was nothing under him. My body reacted before my brain caught up. I stomped the brakes, yanked the shifter, killed the Jake instinctively. Mountain training buried so deep it bypassed thought. The ABS kicked in, pulsing under my boot. The trailer shoved, wanting to come around. For a heartbeat, I felt the whole rig pivot, chains scrabbling on ice, the sickening sensation of weight starting to swing wide. "Come on!" I hissed through clenched teeth, correcting just enough to keep us from jackknifing. The guardrail loomed close on my right, way too close. Beyond it, white nothingness. We shuddered to a stop, engine lugging, wind pounding the side of the trailer. My heart hammered loud enough to drown the storm out for a second. I stared out the windshield. The guardrail stretched away into the white. My headlights caught flakes rushing past and the sheen of ice on the metal. There was no man, no sign of anyone having been there, no footprints on the rail, no scuff marks, nothing. I twisted to look in my right mirror. The drop below was invisible, swallowed by the storm. The emptiness felt thick, somehow, like a presence in itself. Then the wind shifted, just for a moment. It parted the snow in front of my truck like curtains, sweeping a corridor of clearer air down over the edge. My beams punched through the gap. For the first time that night, I saw what was below. They were standing in the void, not on the distant slope, not on any ledge or rocky outcropping. just standing in the space where there should have been nothing but air. Dozens of them, maybe more, men and women, some in trucker caps and heavy coats, some in flannel, some in t-shirts, clothes from different decades. A teenager in a Letterman jacket, a guy still wearing a reflective vest, a woman in a long, faded dress that tugged in a wind I couldn't feel. They weren't floating, they weren't falling, they just stood there, at varying heights, staggered in depth, like they were on invisible steps cut into the sky. All of them facing up, all of them looking straight at me. Their faces were pale, bleached by the cold and the glare. Some slack, some tight, some wet with what might have been melted snow or might have been something else. Eyes wide, not angry, not accusing, hungry, not for flesh or blood. This wasn't a horror movie. It was a different hunger, the hollow, aching kind you get when you've been alone too long in the dark. The space between my cab and the guardrail felt paper thin. My hands locked on the wheel so hard my fingers cramped. One of them, a man in a torn denim jacket with an old trucking company logo I hadn't seen in years, lifted his arm. He raised it slowly, the movement jerky against whatever held him, and reached toward me. His hand stopped short of the guardrail, palm up, as if feeling for heat. The wind roared again, slamming the storm back into place. The corridor of clarity vanished. Snow rushed in, obliterating everything beyond my hood. The figures were gone. The drop was gone. There was only white, beating against the glass. I sat there, engine idling rough, breath loud in my own ears. The cab felt suddenly too small, like the air had been used up. Static crackled once on the CB, then died. I eased my foot off the brake. Slowly, carefully, I brought the rig back into motion. Chains grabbed, bit. The truck rolled forward. As I crawled those last few miles over the summit and down the other side, I kept my eyes on the road, but I could feel it, that weight below, pressed up against the underside of the world. Following, watching, I made it off Devil's Pass that night, dropped into the valley, found a pull-off near a small town, parked with my hands still shaking. In the cafe the next morning, I mentioned the whiteout, how close I'd come to the rail, in that vague way drivers test the waters. The old guy in the booth next to mine, beard gone more gray than black, just nodded. "Storm'll do that to you up there," he said. "That pass has taken more than its share. Trucks, cars, a school bus once. Some went right over in the dark. Never saw it coming." He stirred his coffee, eyes fixed on the table. "Some folks say in a real bad whiteout you can see them down there," he added. "The ones that went over, not falling, just standing around, like they're still waiting for the rest of us to join him." He looked up at me then, gaze steady. "Best thing you can do," he said, "is keep your eyes on the road and don't stop. They're looking for company. I run Devil's Pass when I have to. Money's good on the mountain loads. But I don't key up on 19 there anymore. I don't pull over unless I'm at the chain-up area with other rigs around. And I sure as hell don't stare over the rail, no matter how the wind howls. Because every time the snow comes in sideways and the world shrinks to 2 feet of visibility, I get the same feeling. Like there's a crowd standing just out of sight, stacked in the dark below, heads tilted up, waiting to see if I'll be the next one who doesn't make the turn. I've been doing this long enough to know the highway doesn't stay empty just because you can't see what's on it. Name's Matt. I haul dry van for a mid-sized outfit out of Minneapolis, mostly running I-94 back and forth through North Dakota and Minnesota. Grain, paper, plastics, nothing glamorous. Just freight that doesn't care if it's 40 below as long as it gets where it's going. This was mid-January, just outside Fargo. Night run eastbound, trying to get back toward the cities before the next system rolled in heavy. I'd fueled in Jamestown, knocked back gas station coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard, and pushed on. By the time I hit the outskirts of Fargo, the world had turned to white noise. It wasn't just snowing. It was drifting. The wind out there has a mean streak. It picks up powder off the fields and throws it at the interstate in waves, piling it wherever the plows can't keep up. The drifts that night were taller than my cab in places, stacked along the shoulders like frozen surf. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel between them, throwing shadows that made the piles look alive. Outside temp sat at -15 degrees Fahrenheit on the dash, dropping a degree every time I checked. The heater hummed hard, blowing dry heat at my boots and hands. The cab smelled like old coffee, rubber, and that faint dusty heater smell you only get in deep winter. The windshield had a permanent crust of ice crystals around the edges that the defroster couldn't quite beat. Wipers were losing the fight. Every few minutes they'd drag a little rougher, smearing more than wiping, blades icing up. I'd hit the washer fluid, listen to the pump cough in protest as it tried not to freeze solid, and get maybe 30 seconds of clear glass before the buildup started again. Traffic was thin. A few four-wheelers in clusters, then nothing for long stretches. No other trucks in sight. CB was mostly static on 19, a couple of voices far off, too chewed up by distance and weather to make out. I was somewhere 15, 20 miles past Fargo proper when the passenger side wiper finally gave up. Climbed, hit the arc, and just stuck. A thick, white sleeve of ice had built up around the blade. The motor squealed, trying to pull it back down. You fry that long enough, you're buying a new wiper transmission. I sighed, killed the wipers before they burned themselves out, and squinted through the smear ahead. Couldn't keep going like that. Not with drifts crowding the lane and patches of polished snow pretending to be pavement. Up ahead, through the blown-over beams of my headlights, I spotted a wide section of shoulder by an exit ramp. One of those spots where the plows had cut deep, leaving a hollow sheltered enough to duck into for a minute. No cars behind me, none in front. I signaled anyway, eased off the throttle, and drifted over. Tires crunched up onto packed snow. The trailer gave a little sway as the wind grabbed it broadside, then settled when I straightened her out. I rolled to a stop with my right side up against a drift that towered over the passenger door. I left the engine idling. You don't shut down at -15 unless you plan on staying a while and you've got a sure restart. Air brakes sighed. Cab shuddered. That familiar idle vibration crawling up through the seat. I pulled on my gloves and beanie, zipped my jacket to my throat, and opened the door. The cold hit like someone slapping a wet towel of ice across my face. It stole the moisture out of my nose and throat on the first breath. My eyelashes tried to crust together. The air smelled clean in that way it does when it's too cold for anything to live in it. Just frozen dirt, exhaust, and a faint metallic tang from the road salt. I swung down, boots punching into the packed shoulder. The snow beside the truck loomed over me like a wall. The plows had carved a lane between drifts, but they hadn't cut into them much. The one at my passenger side was taller than I was, shaped by the wind into a rounded wave frozen mid-crash. My headlights threw a yellow glow along its curve, shadows pooling in the little undercuts where the wind had scooped the snow out from beneath itself. The wiper blade looked worse from outside. It had a fat cigar of ice wrapped along the length, solid and opaque. I grabbed it in a gloved hand, flexed it away from the glass, and started cracking the buildup off with my fingers, chunks snapping and dropping to the cowl with a sharp, brittle sound. The engine idled behind me, a low, steady rumble. Wind whistled through the mirror brackets, bumped against my back in gusts. Otherwise, it was quiet, too quiet. Out on the plains, there's usually a constant hiss, far-off tires, wind in distant trees, the hum of the highway. Here, between the drifts, the sound was deadened. The snow walls soaked it up, felt like working in a padded room. I cleared the blade, let it slap back against the glass, and stepped back to check my handiwork. That's when I heard it. Behind me, not from the truck, from the drift. At first it sounded like settling, the tiny squeaks and cracks of snow shifting under its own weight. That happens all the time when the wind changes or a plow goes by. But this wasn't that. This was movement. Slow, heavy, wet, like something big was dragging itself under the crust, pushing the packed snow aside in slow inches. You could hear it tear away from whatever was beneath. A sticky, suctioning sound, muffled, like hands working free from deep, cold mud. It came from about halfway up the drift. Not the base, not the top, right in the middle. I turned toward it, squinting. The headlights caught the curve of the drift. Smooth, wind-polished, no obvious disturbance. but under the smooth surface, shadows shifted. A subtle bulge moved an inch, then another, like something pressing upward from underneath. The sound came again. A long, wet shift. A scrape. Snow granules rolling down the face of the drift in tiny avalanches. I stood there, gloved hands at my sides, breath steaming in front of me. The little rational part of my brain started listing possibilities. Wind, pressure pockets, a loose chunk sliding down inside. Or an animal. Deer maybe caught in the drift. Coyote. Something that got buried when the snow really started blowing and was now trying to fight its way out. That thought got my feet moving before the rest of me had decided. I stepped closer to the drift, boots crunching, head tilted, listening. The wall of snow filled my peripheral vision. It was close enough now that it blocked out the highway entirely. Just me, the truck, and that white face stretching taller than the cab. The sound grew clearer. Not random scrapes, not shifting layers. It preceded itself with a faint thud, then a drag, like elbows or shoulders forcing forward. Then a pause, then again, closer to the outer crust each time. My skin prickled under my thermal layers. "Hey!" I called, because the alternative was staying silent and letting my imagination do the talking. My voice sounded small, eaten up by the drift. "You hear me in there? You stuck?" No answer, obviously. Just another heavy, slow shove. Something dark pushed against the inside of the snow, inches from my face. At first, it was just a shadow swelling under the crust. Then the crust thinned, milky, like frosted glass. The shape behind it pressed harder. An impression formed, not distinct, but wrong. I leaned in without meaning to, breath slowing in spite of the cold, watching. The snow erupted. It didn't crumble like you expect when a drift collapses. It burst outward, a compact section of crust popping off like a lid under pressure, showering me with hard, icy chunks. I stumbled back, boots slipping, hand grabbing at nothing. Something white shot out of the hole. A hand, bare. The skin pale, almost translucent blue-white, stretched thin over knuckles and tendons. Fingers clawed at the air, nails dark, tips broken. Frost clung to the hair on the back of it. Thrashed blindly, scrabbling for purchase on nothing. Then another hand punched through beside it, tearing the hole wider. Snow cascaded, a thick, granular waterfall, hissing as it spilled down the drift. Between the hands, a face pushed out, came slow, like the snow didn't want to let go. Forehead first, then sockets, then nose, then mouth. The lips were black and cracked, split open in multiple places. The skin around them was bluish, blistered in spots like it had frozen, thawed, and frozen again. The eyes were rolled back, only the whites showing, filmed over with frost. The mouth opened wide, wider than it should have, as if every muscle was locked in a scream. No sound came out, just a gust of air that I couldn't feel, turning instantly to a halo of glittering ice crystals around its head. My boots slid under me on the packed snow. I went down hard on one knee, pain lancing up my leg. Instinct hauled me backward, palms scraping cold grit, boots scrambling for purchase. The hands kept reaching, fingers curled and uncurled, clawing at the empty air between us. Snow flaked away from the wrists, revealing bone-white flesh beneath, gray in the shadows. For a heartbeat, too, it looked like the rest of the body would follow. Like whatever was under there was about to drag itself out into my lane, into my night, into my life. Then the drift shuddered. The hole collapsed in on itself with a muffled whump, like something had kicked out the supports from inside. The head vanished under a fall of snow. The hands were swallowed. The face, the hole, the disturbance, all gone. The drift looked smooth again, undisturbed, a sculpted wave, glowing in my headlights. My own breaths came fast and loud in my ears, fogging the air in thick clouds. My knee throbbed. The cold had chewed through my jeans where I'd slammed down. Behind me, my own engine suddenly sounded too loud, roaring in the silence like it was panicking. 2. I scrambled to my feet, backing away from the drift, heart pounding so hard it made my vision pulse. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in the cab, slam the door, and put as many miles between me and this spot as I could. Headlights washed across the snow, cutting a new set of shadows. For a second, I thought it was my imagination. Then I heard it, the deep, throaty growl of diesels fighting snow at high RPMs. Plows. 2 state rigs came around the curve behind me, blades down, spinning up rooster tails of powder. Their amber strobes turned the drifts into a stuttering, flickering landscape. They moved in tandem, one in each lane, carving the road out of the plains again. I waved both arms over my head, stepping closer to the edge of the lane, careful not to get too near the blade line. The lead plow slowed, brakes hissing, and swung a little wider to give me room. The driver's window came down a crack, warm cab light spilling into the winter night. "You broken down?" the driver shouted, voice muffled by engine noise and the wind. "No, My words came out raw, too fast. I swallowed, tried again. "There's something in that drift. Someone. I heard him saw." He laughed. It wasn't cruel. More weary than anything. "Buddy, out here the snow makes all kinds of shapes," he said. "You stare at it long enough at 1 a.m. you'll see Elvis. We've been clearing this stretch every couple hours. Nobody's buried this close to the shoulder." I shook my head hard, throat tightening. "I'm telling you I saw." "Stand back," he cut in, nodding toward the drift. "We'll carve it down, show you it's nothing. Then get your butt back in that truck before you turn into a shape yourself." He rolled the window up before I could answer, tapped the throttle. The plow in front angled its blade toward the drift that had just spit nightmare at me. The second one dropped back, positioning to catch what the first missed. I retreated to the edge of the shoulder, boots crunching, heart hammering in my throat. The lead plow hit the drift hard. Steel screamed against packed snow and ice, a deep grind that I felt through my boots. The blade bit in, carving away the face of the drift in a smooth, practiced line. Snow exploded away in a high, arcing fan, lit orange by their strobes and yellow by my headlights. For a second, inside the cross-section the blade exposed, I saw layers. Compressed bands of old storms, dirty stripes of road grit. It looked like the inside of a cut cake. Harmless. Then, just before the blade shoved that section aside, I saw it. A hand caught in profile in the sliced wall. Fingers curled, nails pale, frozen mid-reach. It jutted from the cross-section of snow like a fossil in rock. Knuckles stretched, tendons tight. Frost crystals glittered along the back of it. In the blink of an eye, the next pass of the blade sheared it away, mixing it into the blast of snow and ice thrown across the ditch. The shape disappeared into the white. My legs almost folded under me. The plows pushed another 40 feet, then eased back into their lanes, satisfied, rolling the freshly cleared path ahead. The last of the drift that had been beside my cab was now a low, mangled ridge along the ditch. As they passed me, the second driver gave a little salute through the glass, like he hadn't seen a thing. I climbed back into my truck on autopilot, one hand on the grab bar, one on the wheel, boots heavy, breaths shallow. The cab felt both too small and the only safe place left in the world. I slammed the door, the sound dull in the insulated space. The heater blasted my face, hot and dry. The windshield, now clear thanks to the wipers I'd come out for, showed a freshly carved channel of road stretching ahead, flanked by torn-up drifts. I put it in gear and rolled. For the next 50 miles, every time I passed another high drift, I caught myself holding my breath, listening. Over the engine and the wind, I thought I heard it again sometimes, that slow, wet drag under the snow right at the limit of hearing. I turned my radio up just to drown it out. I told myself I'd imagined it, that what I'd seen was some weird optical trick, roots, broken fence posts, trash caught in the layers. Then, 2 days later, parked at a truck stop out west, I heard a couple state guys at the next table talking about a sedan they'd finally found in a spring melt a few years back. Drifted over just outside Fargo. Driver never made it out. Hand was still clamped on the door handle when they dug him up. I didn't join the conversation. I just stared at the window, watching the wind push new snow across the lot, building small drifts against the tires and curbs, making shapes. These days, when I pull off to knock ice off my wipers in North Dakota, I keep it quick, and I stay away from the tall drifts. I don't lean in. I don't listen too hard. Because once you've seen a hand claw its way out of the snow and still be reaching when it's frozen solid, you never look at those white walls along the highway the same way again. I've been running long enough to know there are worse things than empty miles at night. Name's Harris. I pull dry van for a small outfit out of Minnesota, mostly I-94 runs Fargo, Bismarck, Miles City, turn around, do it again. 13 years over the road. I know that stretch between Fargo and Bismarck like the lines on my own hands. Or I thought I did. This was late January, about a year ago now. North Dakota winter, the kind where the sky forgets there ever was a sun. Just gray in the day, black at night, and wind in between. I was westbound on I-94, a little past midnight. I'd fueled in Fargo, grabbed bad coffee and worse pie, and pushed back out into a world made of two things: snow and darkness. It wasn't snowing hard, not like some nights, just flurries, gusts, enough to dust the road and hide the shine when it shouldn't be there. The dangerous kind of night, not dramatic, just slick. Outside temp was hovering around -9 degrees Fahrenheit on the dash. Wind from the north, steady enough to lean the trailer if you didn't pay attention. The heater was humming on high, blowing that dry, plastic-smelling warmth around my legs. Cab smelled like old coffee, diesel on my jacket, and that dusty fabric scent from the sleeper mattress behind me. Radio was low, some country station fading in and out between towns. CB on 19, volume down just enough that if someone yelled about a wreck or a moose, I'd hear it over the hum. My rig that winter was a white Cascadia the company had picked up used. Nothing special. She had a slight pull to the right and a rattle in the passenger side door that came and went. The driver's side mirror housing had a spiderweb crack in the corner. You get to know all the little flaws after a few thousand miles. The road that night looked clean. A gray ribbon with thin lines of snow whispering across it, blown off the fields. Plows had been through. Lanes were clear. But every now and then my headlights would hit a patch that looked just a shade darker, a little more glass than asphalt. Black ice. You don't see black ice so much as feel it. The wheel goes soft. The tires go quiet. The truck stops talking to you. Somewhere around the halfway mark to Bismarck, the world got even emptier. No taillights ahead. No headlights behind. Just my own beams carving a tunnel through the dark. I remember glancing at the clock. 12:47 a.m. That's when the tires went silent. 1 second I had that low, comforting hiss of rubber on winter pavement. The next, it was like the truck lifted a fraction of an inch and started sliding on glass. The steering wheel got light in my hands. Too light. Then the trailer started to go. It began as a little twitch. Just a suggestion. The wind caught one side, the ice took the other, and 80,000 pounds of freight decided it wanted to be somewhere else. The rear of the trailer swung right. The cab hesitated, then followed, like a reluctant dance partner. The mirrors rattled hard in their brackets. I heard something loose in the sleeper thump against the wall. The whole rig turned into a slow-motion sideways slide. I did what training and habit drilled into me. Jake, break off. No sudden stabs. Hands even on the wheel. Steer into the skid. Feel for where the tires are still paying attention. Ease off the throttle. Don't touch the service brakes till they'll do more good than harm. All that went through my head in the space of a heartbeat. What came with it was a cold wave that had nothing to do with the weather. The cab felt suddenly smaller, tighter, like the air had thickened. As the trailer came around, I caught the left mirror in my peripheral vision, the big flat glass showing the side of my box and the dark lane behind. Only it wasn't just my trailer in that mirror anymore. There was someone sitting in my sleeper. He was in the reflection, in the dark square behind my seat. A man, leaning forward on the edge of the bunk, head bowed, shoulders hunched. His hands were clasped between his knees. His back rose and fell in short, sharp movements like he was sobbing. The dash lights painted him in faint green and orange, enough to show the outline of a dark jacket, the curve of his neck, the shape of his hair. My first thought was so stupid it almost makes me laugh now. Someone broke in at the last truck stop. Like I'd just forgotten I had a grown man asleep in my bunk for the last 100 miles. The slide dragged us farther across the lane. I felt the rear drive tires search for something they could believe in. Somewhere under everything, the engine still hummed its same low note, oblivious. I tore my eyes from the mirror and spun around in the seat, heart punching my ribs. The sleeper was empty, just the shadowed shape of the mattress. My duffel bag strapped in place. A pair of work boots on the floor where I'd kicked them earlier. Fabric walls, the little storage cabinets, the glow from the inverter's LED. No man, no shape, nothing. A half second later, reality snapped back in the form of the trailer continuing to slide. I whipped my head back forward, grabbed the wheel with both hands, and eased into the skid, trying to coax the rig back into line before we became part of the snowbanks. The rear end started to answer, just a little, enough to know there was still a chance. I checked the left mirror again, just to see how far the trailer had kicked. He was still there, closer. In the glass, he sat farther forward on the bunk, almost directly behind my seat now. His head was still down, chin near his chest. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. His face I couldn't see yet, just the top of his head, the line of his jaw. Dark hair stuck up in the back like it had gotten wet and frozen that way. I flicked my eyes from the mirror to the road, back again. Empty sleeper in real life, occupied sleeper in the reflection. I don't care how calm you think you are. Your brain is not built to handle that at 60 miles an hour on black ice. The trailer started to swing left now, correcting too far, the classic pendulum. The back end overcompensated, trying to get in front of the cab. I rode it, hands loose but firm, breathing in and out through my nose so I didn't start panting like a rookie. In the tiny, shaking circle of the steering wheel, my knuckles looked white. The CB hissed a little louder, like the static was leaning in to listen. I felt him before I heard him. The air behind my seat changed. That's the only way I can say it. The temperature dropped a notch back there, a little pocket of cold that didn't match the rest of the cab. The hairs on my forearms lifted under my jacket. My spine felt like someone poured ice water down it. Then, from the sleeper, close enough that I should have felt breath on my neck, a voice whispered, "Don't crash, it hurts." The sound went through me like a wire. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just those 4 words, torn off the edges of a raw throat. Male, youngish, flattened by something, pain, cold, distance, I don't know. I did not turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to look, to check, to get eyes on whatever was behind me. Some other, older instinct, the one that keeps you from staring too long into an oncoming skid or over the edge of a cliff, said, "If you look, you're done." So I didn't. I locked my eyes on the faint suggestion of lane ahead, hands working the wheel in small corrections, feeling for the road through my palms and my feet and the seat under me. The trailer fought like an animal. The chains in the racks under the frame rattled against each other. I could feel every pallet in the box shifting weight, energy threatening to roll us if I pushed back too hard. In the left mirror, at the very edge of my sight, he moved. He leaned forward, closer to the back of my seat, as if he was about to grab me. I saw the motion, the shadow of it, the way the dim light shifted over his shoulders. "I felt it," he whispered, voice barely audible over the wind and the engine. Metal folding, glass in my face. "Fire. Don't do it again. Don't." The last word frayed out into a hoarse little exhale. I didn't answer him. I didn't say a word. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. The road stretched on in front of me, a flickering, uncertain ribbon. The truck's momentum bled off inch by inch. 45, 40, 35. The speedometer needle dropped, juddering as the ABS chattered under my foot. Finally, mercifully, the tires bit into something real. The steering wheel got its weight back. The trailer straightened, falling back into line like it remembered how this was supposed to work. The world stopped spinning sideways and pointed forward again. I let us coast, easing us off into the right lane, then onto a stretch of shoulder where the plows had actually taken a bite out of the snow. The truck rolled to a shaky stop. I pulled the parking brake. The air dumped with a loud, wet hiss. The engine dropped into a softer idle. The sudden quiet in the cab was almost worse than the storm. I sat there, hands still locked on the wheel, heart thrumming in my ears. My breath fogged the air in front of me, quicker than it should have in the heated cab. For a long moment I didn't move. Then, slowly, I turned my head and looked into the driver's side mirror. The trailer sat straight behind me, hazard lights flicking amber into the night. Beyond it, the empty highway stretched away, snow swirling in the beams. In the mirror, the sleeper was empty. No hunched figure, no shaking shoulders, just my rumpled bedding, the duffel bag, the dim little night light shining from the corner. I twisted around in my seat, to be sure. Same view, empty. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands finally came off the wheel. They were shaking harder than I wanted to admit. I was about to chalk the whole thing up to stress, to a bad adrenaline dump on ice, when something in the rear window caught my eye. Most guys I know keep that little window over the sleeper bunk either blocked off or so dirty with road grime it's basically painted. Mine was somewhere in between, dusty, corners fogged, a faint ring of frost clinging to the edges where the heater couldn't quite reach. Now, in the weak glow from the bunk light, I saw the frost was thicker. Not random either. It had formed a shape. Right in the center of the glass, pressed from the inside, was a handprint. You've seen kids' hands on windows. Splayed fingers, palm in the middle, smears where they drag down. This wasn't like that. This hand was larger, adult-sized. The fingers were long, pressed flat, and hard enough that the frost had built up in dense lines where each bone would be. The thumb angled in slightly the way it does when you brace yourself. It was as clear as if someone had put their hand against the cold glass and left an imprint of cold behind, except I hadn't been back there. Not since I'd made the bed hours before. And the handprint was on the inside. My skin crawled. I reached back with one gloved hand and, after a hesitation that felt much longer than it was, touched the glass next to the print. It was colder there than anywhere else in the cab. Not just cool, biting, like touching the side of a chest freezer that's been sitting open in a meat locker. The frost lines overlapped faintly with older streaks and smudges on the window. Like it wasn't the first time. I sat back down, staring at the print, following each finger with my eyes. The more I looked, the more I noticed little gaps in the frost along the edges, like the outline had been made over and over in almost the same place, getting thicker each time. Eventually, I put the truck back in gear and eased us back onto the interstate. Bismarck wasn't going to come to me. The road ahead looked exactly like the road behind. Anonymous, flat, never-ending. The sleeper stayed quiet the rest of the drive. No whispers, no cold pockets. The handprint lingered on the glass until the heater finally ate it away, beads of water running down like melted snow off a glove. I told myself I wasn't going to mention any of it. You don't want to be that guy. The one who sees things in his sleeper and hears voices on lonely stretches of highway. Dispatch starts watching your logs a little too closely. Safety wants to chat. People start suggesting time off. But the next morning, in a truck stop cafe outside Bismarck, I was nursing my third cup of coffee when I heard two older drivers at the counter talking about black ice west of Fargo. The way their voices dropped made me listen. Bad patch last year, one said. Took out a driver in a Cascadia. Jackknifed him, then a straight over. Fireball. They say he was still on the mic when it went, screaming about the sleeper. The other shook his head. That the one kept saying he didn't want to die in there? I heard about that. Poor bastard. Yeah, kept keying up on 19, repeating himself. Don't crash, it hurts. Gave me chills just hearing it on the playback. The first guy sipped his coffee, then added, almost as an afterthought, company sold the wreck off in pieces. Heard they rebuilt the cab on another frame. Some outfit out of Minnesota bought it. My cup stopped halfway to my mouth. My company had mentioned my Cascadia was a rebuilt unit. New frame, salvage cab. Good deal, they'd said. Lots of trucks out here share the same scars. I didn't ask questions. I finished my coffee, went back out to the lot, and climbed into my rig. The handprint on the back window was gone, but I could still see it if I let my eyes go unfocused. the spread fingers, the pressed-in palm, reaching out from behind my shoulder. These days, when I hit black ice on I-94, I do what I've always done, ease off, steer gentle, ride it out. But I don't look in the sleeper mirror while I'm doing it. I don't want to know who might be sitting back there, reliving their last 30 seconds through mine. And on the coldest nights, when the heater can't quite keep up and the frost creeps back across the rear glass, I don't turn around to see what shapes it's making. Because I've already seen one ghost leave his handprint in my cab. I don't need to know if he's still trying to warn me or trying to pull me in with him. I've been out here long enough to know there are some uniforms you don't argue with. Name's Blake. I haul reefer out of Spokane. Produce meat, whatever pays and needs a box that hums. My routes take me up through Idaho and across Montana, over the passes and along those 2 lanes the tourists think are scenic until the first snow hits. This was midwinter, late January, up near Whitefish, Montana. I'd picked up a partial load out of Kalispell, frozen cuts bound for distribution farther east, and was running US 93 north toward Whitefish before cutting over on 40 to hook back toward the interstate. Nothing complicated. Couple more hours of blacktop, then a truck stop, then a bunk that didn't shake. By the time I rolled out of Kalispell, the sky was already closing in. Low, heavy clouds that sat right on top of the treeline, hiding the stars. Snow had been coming down all day, light, steady, that dry powder that never seems like much until the plows fall behind. It was just after midnight. Outside temp sat at 10 degrees Fahrenheit when I left the yard. By the time I hit the outskirts, it had dropped to 3 degrees. The wind off the lake knifed across the road, pushing loose powder into low drifts along the shoulders. My world inside the cab was its own little capsule. Heater on mid-high, blowing dry warmth at my boots and knees. Dash lights turned down low, soft green glow on the gauges. The air smelled like spilled truck stop coffee, cheap hand sanitizer, and the rubber and fabric mix of a cab that's seen 100,000 miles of winters. The reefer unit thumped a steady rhythm behind me, that familiar whump-whump you feel more than hear. The road was mostly empty. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. Just my beams cutting 2 narrow cones through the falling snow, catching reflective posts and the occasional highway sign as they flashed past. CB on 19 was quiet. A low hiss, a pop now and then when someone keyed up miles away. No chatter, no scale talk. Just that background static that feels more lonely when there's no voice riding on it. US 93 north of Kalispell in winter is one of those stretches that can lull you to sleep or kill you if you let it. Forest tight on both sides. Dark shapes of pines shouldering up against the right-of-way. Every now and then, a break in the trees where a side road or a farmhouse driveway fed into the highway, but at midnight in a snowstorm, all of those looked the same, black holes in the wall of white. I settled in at about 45, slower when the road started to look more like polished stone than asphalt. You can feel black ice more than you see it, that slight lightness in the wheel, the way the engine tone shifts when the tires stop biting and start gliding. Somewhere south of Whitefish, with the snow coming heavier, I caught a glow in my driver's side mirror, red and blue, pulsing faint through the swirling flakes. My stomach did that little drop it always does when you see cherries in the glass, even when you know you're clean. I checked my speed, 43. No one else around. No reason to be getting lit up, far as I knew. But out here at night on a storm-slick highway, I've learned not to play games with highway patrol. If they want a word, you give it to them. The lights got closer, reflected off the trailer first, then flared brighter in the mirror. I could just make out the silhouette of a cruiser behind me, low and boxy, light bar rolling. I clicked my right signal, eased off the throttle, and rolled onto the shoulder where the plows had cut a narrow flat. Tires crunched through a thin crust of blown-in snow. I coasted to a stop, air brakes sighing, and flipped on my four-ways. The cruiser pulled in behind me, lights still spinning. Through the side mirror, I saw its headlights wash over my reefer doors, painting the snow in hard white. Red and blue strobes bounced off the side of the trailer, off the trees, off the drifting flakes. I flicked on my interior light and dug out my wallet from the console, pulling my license, medical card, and permits. Habit. My hands smelled like diesel and sanitizer. A faint shiver had settled into my fingers, part cold, part adrenaline. Outside, the wind pushed against the cab, making it rock just enough to feel it. I rolled the driver's window down halfway. Cold air knifed in immediately, bringing with it the sharp, metallic smell of snow and the faint tang of exhaust from the idling cruiser. Red and blue lights spilled into the cab, strobing across my hands, across the dash. I heard a door open behind me, a solid, hollow clunk of a sedan door in the cold. Then it shut. Footsteps in the snow. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Coming up along my driver's side. Slow, even. The steady approach of someone used to walking up to vehicles in all conditions hundreds of times. My window fogged slightly at the edges from the temperature difference. I wiped it with the back of my glove, clearing the view, staring at the mirror. The footsteps stopped right below my door. Knuckles rapped twice against the metal near the lower hinge. I turned my head toward the open window. There was no one there, just wind. Snow spinning in the headlights, guardrail on the far side of the lane. And behind me, in the mirror, the patrol car sitting at an angle on the shoulder. Engine running, exhaust pluming, light bar still throwing red and blue halos into the night. "Evening, officer," I said anyway, because the brain takes time to catch up with what the eyes are screaming. My voice misted in the cold air just outside the window. "Everything all right?" Silence answered. No crunch of boots repositioning. No voice. No gloved hand resting on the door. The hair on the back of my neck lifted, one by one, like static was building in the cab. I leaned out a little, looking down along the side of the truck. Empty snow. My steps on the passenger side from when I checked my tires back in Kalispell already half filled. No fresh prints near the door. Nothing that said a full-grown adult had just walked up out of a cruiser and stood there. The cruiser itself was about 30 feet back. Classic Montana Highway Patrol livery. Light bar working. Headlights on low. Driver's side door shut. Windows dark. No silhouette in the front seat. I killed my interior light to see better. The cab dropped into a softer glow from the dash. The cruiser's windshield stayed a black mirror. Every rational thing I had left threw options at me. Maybe he'd step back to the radio. Maybe there was another trooper on the passenger side I hadn't seen. Maybe. Another part of me was already reaching for the door handle. Because whatever else was happening, wandering around half-stopped on the shoulder in a Montana snowstorm with a mystery behind your trailer isn't smart. I hesitated with my hand on the latch. Then the cruiser's passenger door creaked. Not loud, just a slow, stiff hinge movement. I saw it open a few inches, then a little more. No one leaned out. No dome light clicked on inside. It just opened. A pocket of colder air slid into the night with it. I felt it in the cab, like something sucking warmth out through the open window. From that open doorway, over the soft hiss of the cruiser's radio, a voice came. Not over the loudspeaker, not shouted, just spoken. "Get back in your truck." It wasn't a barked order. It wasn't a threat. It sounded tired. There was grit in it, like someone had spent a career yelling over highway noise and drunks and engines. Male, mid-range, barely raised louder than conversational, but it cut through the wind like it was next to my ear. Every nerve in me wanted to ask questions. What's wrong? What's out here? Who are you? Instead, my fingers tightened on the door handle, and I eased it shut. The interior felt instantly safer with the glass between me and the night. Not safe, just less exposed. I left the window up, left my license and cards on the dash. My hands were shaking hard enough now that the plastic fluttered. In the mirror, the passenger door of the cruiser stayed hanging open, black gap inside. Light bar still rolling. Headlights still on the back of my trailer. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then, as if nothing strange had happened, the door swung itself closed. The lock plunger didn't move. No shadow leaned over from the inside to grab it. It just shut. Soft, final thunk. Red and blue lights kept spinning. I don't know how long I sat there, waiting. 10 seconds. 30. A minute. Long enough for doubt to sneak in around the edges of adrenaline. Long enough to start convincing myself I'd misheard, misseen, everything. Then both of the cruiser's headlights winked out at the same time. Not dimmed, not faded, cut, like a switch had been thrown. The light bar stayed on another half-second, bathing the snow and trees and the side of my trailer in those rotating colors. My cab filled with flash after flash of red and blue. Then it flickered. The whole bar stuttered the way old fluorescents do. Flash, flash, flash. And then the colors collapsed, sucked inward like someone had put a dome over the car and closed it. The cruiser was still there for a heartbeat after the lights died. A black shape against the white. Then it wasn't. 1 second, there was the distinct outline of a patrol sedan on the shoulder behind me. The next, my mirrors were full of nothing but empty road, snow drifting across 2 dark lanes, and my own hazy taillight glow bouncing off a low wall of plowed snow farther back. No tire tracks where it had sat. No fresh churn in the drift where its wheels would have sunk. Just the faint footprint of where my own trailer had kicked powder up earlier. The CB crackled once. A sharp spit of static, then went quiet again. My heart thudded hard in my ears. My fingers dug into the steering wheel hard enough to make the leather creak. After a while, could have been 30 seconds, could have been 5 minutes, I took my foot off the brake, put the truck back in gear, and eased us back onto the highway. US 93 unspooled ahead. The snow swallowed the world 10 seconds at a time in front of my bumper. The heater hummed. The reefer thumped. The radio in my dash played some song I didn't hear. I kept my speed conservative, eyes sweeping between the lines and the mirrors. Part of me kept expecting to see those red and blues pop back on behind me. That black shape reappear, closer this time. It never did. Whitefish finally showed itself as a faint glow behind the trees. A few streetlights, a gas station, signs half buried in plow walls. Civilization in miniature. I parked up at a little combo truck stop and diner near the highway. Not my usual, but open late and close. Shut down, did a quick post trip in the sting of the cold, then went inside. The diner smelled like grease, coffee, and wet snow melting off boots. A couple of locals sat at the counter. 2 other drivers hunched over plates in a corner. I took a stool at the end, ordered coffee. My hands were steady enough to wrap around the mug. The heat sank into them like I'd been outside for hours instead of minutes. After a while, I asked the waitress, casual as I could, "Montana Highway Patrol run this stretch a lot at night?" She shrugged. "Sometimes," she said. "Bad weather, sure." "Why?" One of the locals, a man in his 50s with a faded ball cap and a jacket that said Flathead County on the breast, glanced over. "You get pulled?" he asked. "Thought I did," I said. "Car lit me up south of town. Came up behind me, had me on the shoulder. Never did see the trooper's face." He stared at me a bit longer than comfortable. "Where exactly?" he asked. "Before the river? After?" I gave him the rough mile marker. Memory had burned that patch of road into my head in high resolution. He exhaled slow through his nose, took a sip of his coffee, then set it down carefully. "About 10 years back," he said. "We lost a trooper on that curve. Winter night, chasing a DUI. Other car lost it, slammed broadside into his unit, pushed him off into the trees. Took fire out there a while to get to him. Didn't make it." The waitress, wiping a table nearby, nodded without looking up, like she'd heard the story enough times. "Ever since," the man went on, "folks say sometimes you'll get lit up there on a bad night. Cruiser behind you, lights going. You pull over, do what you're supposed to do, and nobody ever walks up." He met my eyes again. "Most of the drivers who talk about it say the same thing," he said quietly. Hear a voice telling him to get back in the truck, to keep moving, like he's still out there working the job, still trying to keep people from ending up where he did. He let it sit there between us. In the diner light, my reflection in the front window looked normal. Just another tired driver in a beanie and flannel, staring at his own eyes between streaks of snow. Out on US 93, the snow kept falling. I finished my coffee, went back out to my rig, and climbed into the cab. The heater had kept it from going entirely cold, but the air still had a bite. For a moment before I turned the key, I just sat there with my hand resting on the wheel, listening to the tick of cooling metal. "Thanks," I said into the quiet, feeling stupid and not caring. The truck didn't answer. There was just the hum of the reefer and the faint hiss of wind around the door seals. I still run that stretch near Whitefish. Freight doesn't route itself around ghosts, but I don't ignore lights in my mirrors out there. And if I ever feel the urge to stand around on the shoulder longer than I should, I remember that voice, rough, tired, absolutely certain. Get back in your truck. These mountains and these winters have taken enough of us. Some of them, I think, are still trying to make sure the rest don't join them too soon. I've been on the road long enough to know when a place doesn't want you there. Name's Rick. I run a dedicated lane for a grocery outfit out of Ohio, Chicago to Cheyenne and back along I-80, mostly reefer loads. I've seen every mood that interstate's got. From July heat boiling off the asphalt to whiteout so bad you can't see your own hood ornament. This was a winter run, middle of January. Eastbound, empty on the way back toward Toledo after dropping frozen goods in Nebraska. I was light, maybe 20,000 in the box, which is about the last thing you want in a crosswind with ice under your tires. It was just after 2 in the morning when I saw the sign for Rest Area 41A. You know the kind of night it was from the way the truck sounded. The wind didn't just whistle, it slammed. It hit the side of the trailer in these hard, angry gusts, making the whole rig shudder, airbags hissing as they flexed. Snow hammered the cab roof like someone dumping buckets of rock salt on it. Outside temp said 6 degrees Fahrenheit, but the wind chill took it somewhere that would bite exposed skin in under a minute. Inside, the cab was a little bubble of stale warmth. Heater humming high, blowing dry air at my boots. Wipers squeaking across a windshield that never really got clear, thin crust of ice building in the corners faster than the defroster could chew it away. The smell in the cab was the usual cocktail. Burnt truck stop coffee, old fries in the bag on the floor, diesel and de-icer baked into my jeans. Logbook said I still had time in the drive window, but my legs were starting to twitch. I'd been sitting solid since the last fuel stop, maybe 4 hours back. Coffee had run through me. Knees were stiff. I needed 2 minutes off the seat. Bathroom, stretch, splash water on my face. Anything. 80 was dead. No headlights in my mirrors, no taillights ahead. Just my own beams hitting a gray skin of snow on the pavement and high walls of plowed drifts on either side. Trucks were all huddled up in the last big truck stop 20 miles back. Only idiots and deadlines do the rest area dance on nights like that. I saw the blue sign a half-mile out. Rest Area 41A, 1 mile. Just text, no services listed. I'd pulled in there a couple times in summer. Older stop. No fuel, no fast food. Just a cinderblock building, soda machines, picnic tables for the 3 weeks a year the weather isn't trying to kill you. The smart move was to keep rolling. My bladder disagreed. I hit the signal, eased into the right lane, and rolled up the exit ramp. The wind hit different as soon as I left the interstate. It curled around the building and trees, shoved sideways at the cab like it was trying to slide me off the ramp. My tires crunched through blown snow that had drifted back over the pavement. The plows had been through, but the storm was winning. The truck parking lot at 41 opened up in front of me like a gray, empty lake. Sodium lights buzzed overhead, shining sick yellow circles down onto 4 long parking lanes. Only 2 other trucks were there. One old Peterbilt, curtains drawn, snow rime thick along the grill. One reefer unit humming soft at the far end, its trailer half buried at the wheels. No movement, no cabs with TVs flickering behind the glass. Just shapes in the storm. I picked a slot closer to the building than usual, maybe 5 spots away from the sidewalk. Killed my speed, let the rig roll to a stop. Parking brake popped, air dumped. The engine dropped into that deep idle rumble that feels like a big heart beating under your feet. Snow hammered the roof. The whole cab shivered with each gust. You could feel the cold clawing at the seams of the doors. I grabbed my beanie from the bunk, zipped my jacket all the way up, shoved my hands into gloves that still hadn't fully dried from the last chain up, and opened the door. The wind punched in. For a second, it took my breath like I'd stepped into a freezer, and someone slammed the door behind me. My eyelashes tried to freeze together on the first blink. My breath hit the air and turned to fog so thick it seemed solid. Boots hit the asphalt with a dull woof. A thin skin of blown snow crunched underfoot, revealing dark wet underneath where the ground had warmed slightly from truck exhaust earlier. The walk to the building wasn't far. Felt longer. The snow came at me sideways, needling my cheeks, filling my ears with a high, soft hiss. The building itself was just a dull, squat shape under the buzzing lights. Brown brick, low roof, slit windows glowing weak fluorescent yellow. Automatic doors wheezed open as I approached, blowing out a bellyful of lukewarm, chemical-smelling air. For half a second I stood in that space where outside and inside fought each other. Cold clawing at my back, heat pushing at my chest. Then I stepped through. The noise changed. Outside, it had been all wind and engine and snow. Inside, it was humming fixtures, a vending machine compressor, the faint echo of pipes in the walls. The air smelled like industrial cleaner, stale piss, cheap soap, and that damp smell old buildings get in winter when moisture never really dries. To my left, a line of vending machines blinked in a corner. Soda, chips, a coffee dispenser that looked older than I was. To my right, a doorway with the universal stick figure sign for men's room. The main area was empty. No families huddled over maps. No kids running wild. No other drivers stomping snow off their boots. Just me. I pushed into the men's room. The light in there was harsher. Bright fluorescence that flattened everything. Gray tile, white fixtures, beige partition doors. The air was cooler than the lobby, with a sharper edge of ammonia and wet concrete. One urinal along the wall. 3 sinks. For stalls. 3 stall doors stood wide open, black gaps showing clean, empty bowls. The last one, all the way at the end, was closed. The metal latch showed dark in the seam. I was halfway to the sinks when I heard it. Sobbing. Not loud. Not movie loud. Quiet. Ragged. The kind of crying someone does when they're trying not to make a sound. Came from the closed stall. High-pitched enough that, for a second, I pictured a kid. Then something in the tone, the weariness, made me think of an adult who had run out of places to put their fear. I stopped dead, boots squeaking a little on damp tile. "Hey!" I called, pitching my voice steady. "You okay in there?" The sobbing cut off like someone hit a switch. Silence. The fluorescent hum seemed louder. A sink somewhere up in the building dripped slowly, each plink ghosting through the pipes. My own breath felt too loud. I waited. "Look." I tried again, stepping a little closer. "It's late, weather's bad. You need help? You stuck? Hurt?" Nothing. The gap at the bottom of the stall door showed maybe an inch of shadow. No shoes. No pants pooled around ankles. Just darkness and tile. Cold crawled up from the floor through the soles of my boots, into my ankles. I was close enough now to see the chipped paint on the metal divider, the way someone had carved initials into it years ago and cleaning crews had half scrubbed them away. The latch on the inside of the door rattled once. Soft, like someone's hand had brushed it. The door creaked open an inch. Not much. Just enough to change the shape of the crack. Just enough to let a breath of colder air leak out into the room. I didn't see a face. Didn't see a body. I saw a hand. It slid out along the floor from that narrow opening, palm down, fingers stretching. It was the wrong color. Not just pale. Not winter pale like a guy who hadn't seen the sun since October. It was that flat, waxy white with a blue undertone you only see in hospital basements and crime scene photos. The knuckles were swollen. The skin over them cracked and raw. Fingernails were torn, jagged, dark at the edges like dried blood clung underneath. Frost clung to the hair on the back of it. It crept forward, inch by inch, feeling along the tile like it was searching for something warm. My mouth went dry. "Help me," a voice whispered. Came from the stall, from somewhere above that hand. Thin, breathy, shredded. Genderless in that moment, just pure need. Every sane part of me screamed to back up and get out. Another part, the stupid human part that can't walk away from someone asking for help, took over my legs. I stepped forward. Hand went down toward the latch. The stall door slammed. It hit so hard the metal shook. The crack of it echoed off the tile, rang in my ears. I felt the air move in a small shockwave against my thighs. The latch clanged as it tore across the striker plate. Somewhere above, a light flickered. Hairline fractures spidered out from one of the mounting bolts in the partition wall. I stumbled back a step, heart punching under my ribs. The sobbing did not start again. I swallowed hard, planted my boot, and did the dumbest thing I've done in 2 decades of driving. I kicked the door. The metal boomed, a deep, hollow sound that vibrated up my leg. On the second kick, the cheap stall lock gave, twisting. The door rebounded inward, slamming against the partition with a clang. The stall was empty. Toilet, tank, back wall, nothing else. No shoes, no bundled shape, no one curled up on the closed lid. The seat was up, porcelain dry. No puddle on the floor, no drip from clothing or hair. The tile was the same pale, scuffed gray as everywhere else, smeared with the faint marks of 1,000 old cleaning mops. No handprint, no wet streak where a palm had slid. I stood there breathing hard, the sound echoing back at me from the stall walls. My breath fogged faintly in the air. It was colder in that little square, noticeably colder, like an AC vent was blasting in winter. There was no vent. In the mirror over the sinks, my reflection looked off. Skin a shade too gray under the fluorescent lights. Eyes wide, pupils big. Behind my shoulder, for half a second, I thought I saw the last stall door still shut. I turned to look. All 4 doors were open now, slightly askew, like surprised mouths. Somewhere above, in the ceiling space, something in a pipe thumped, followed by the distant rush of water. That broke whatever trance I'd let myself slip into. I backed toward the exit, hands damp inside my gloves. The restroom felt like it was holding its breath with me. I pushed the door with more force than I needed. It flew open into the lobby, hinges squealing. As I stepped out, another sound followed, soft at first, then growing. The stalls. One by one, their doors started to move. Not slamming this time, not banging back and forth in some random draft. They creaked, slowly, in unison. I glanced back just in time to see all 4 doors, the ones I just left gaping, swing inward and then outward again, opening wide all at once, like they were taking a synchronized breath. The sobbing started again, not from one stall, from all of them, layered, thin, high, low, choked. A chorus of someone crying alone, multiplied. I didn't stay to listen. I cut across the lobby, boots biting on old tile, slapped the automatic door panel with a gloved hand. It hesitated for half a heartbeat, just long enough for panic to spike hot up the back of my neck, then hissed open. The wind hit me like it had been waiting. I half-jogged back to the truck, head down against the stinging snow. My breaths tore in and out of my lungs like I'd run a mile, not 50 feet. The building loomed at my back. I refused to look at its windows. Climbing up into the cab, my hands shook so badly I fumbled the grab bar. The door thunked shut with a solidity that felt like a promise. I twisted the lock without thinking, even though nobody in their right mind was out there to yank it open. The cab smelled like coffee and diesel and safety. I sat there for a full minute, gloved hands pressed to the wheel, letting my heart catch up to my body. Snow hammered the windshield. The heater blew too hot air at my face. The reefer bumped steadily behind me. Eventually, muscle memory took over. I checked my mirrors. The rest area sat behind me, lit, innocuous. No patrol cars. No other drivers heading inside. Just that squat little building hunched under the weight of the storm. For a moment, in the reflection of one of the narrow bathroom windows, I thought I saw movement. Like a flicker of white at the bottom of the frame, a hand pressed to glass. Then the truck shifted in the wind, the angle changed, and it was just snow again. I pulled out. I didn't stop until the next major truck stop, another 50 miles down, where there were people and noise and fluorescent hell and hot food that tasted like salt and grease and life. Later that morning, killing an hour over eggs that had given up on being eggs, I mentioned 41A to an older guy at the next table. Not the hand, not the stall, just the feeling. Stopped there last night, I said. Didn't like it. Bathroom felt weird. He snorted into his coffee. Rest stop 41A? He said. Yeah, you're not the first. Had a bad one there few winters back. Runaway kid. Girl. Picked up from a gas station couple exits away and dropped, they figure. Last place they know she went was that rest area. Cameras caught her go into the building during a storm. Never caught her leaving. He shrugged, eyes going distant. Some say she tried to walk out into the lot and got buried. Some say she never made it out of the stall. They didn't find her till spring, when the snow melted off the drainage out back. He took another sip, like he hadn't just said something that made the room feel 10 degrees colder. I don't know how much of that is barstool lore and how much is reportable fact. What I know is what I saw, or thought I saw. A pale hand, reaching under a stall door in a rest stop that feels too quiet on bad winter nights. A voice that sounded like frostbitten lungs and hopelessness. For stall doors breathing in unison behind me as I ran. I still run 80. Still past the sign for 41A. But I don't stop there anymore. Not when it's snowing. Not when the lot's empty. Not when the wind shakes the cab hard enough to rattle your bones and you start to hear things in the spaces between the gusts. Things that sound like someone sobbing behind a thin metal door, waiting for help that never really comes.